Call the meeting of the Environmental Resources Committee to order. We will begin with item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On to item 3, public comment. We did not have anybody signed up for public comment. Item number 4, approval of the November 1st, 2022 committee minutes. They were in your packet. Motion to approve would be in order. Motion by Supervisor Shafinsky, second by Supervisor Drabek. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to item number 5, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, or resolution. Public hearings, review, possible actions, and possible recommendations to the county board for its consideration. County zoning changes 5A 1 through 3. I'd ask that everyone please mute your electronic devices at this time. The Marathon County ERC is now meeting in public hearing on the location, plan, specifications, and purpose of the following projects. 1, Terrence Marsh, General Agriculture to Rural Estate, Town of River Falls. 2, Dan and Carolyn Krimmer, Rural Residential to General, give me 1 second here, General Agriculture, Town of Clover. 3, Riverside Land Surveying, Nathan Wincheston on behalf of Thomas and Nicole Bukowski, General Agriculture to Rural Estate, Town of Reed. The members of the committee we have today, I'll just go through the roster that we have. Myself, Jake Langenhahn, from the County Board, Supervisor Drabek, Supervisor Seefeld, Supervisor Overbeck, Supervisor Ritter, Supervisor Svensky, Supervisor Shafinsky, Supervisor Unger, and Marilyn Bend, our Wisconsin Towns and Villages Association rep, and Rodney Roskoff, our Farm Service Agency representative. Also present from our staff include Lori Miskimans, our Conservation Planning and Zoning Director, Kirsty Heidenreich, our County Conservationist, Shad Harvey, our Land Resource Manager, Nicole Delaunay, our Administrative Coordinator, Garrett Poggle, our Land Use Specialist, and Teal Fikesen, our Land Use Specialist. The establishment of the ERC is required by law for purposes of administration of county ordinances and land conservation programs. The committee must follow state laws and local ordinances as written. This committee cannot change or ignore any part of the ordinances or state laws and must apply the laws as written. The purpose of this committee is to hear and decide on proposed ordinances and ordinance revisions, rezoning petitions, and provide direction on land conservation and planning programs. The ERC will give a full and fair hearing to any person applying for a rezone petition. A taped recording is being made of the meeting, which will assist with preparation of written hearing minutes. The committee is interested in hearing all pertinent comments and questions. Each hearing will be opened by reading the public notice and allowing staff to present a staff report, including evidence from any on-site inspection. The applicant and anyone wishing to testify will be sworn in and allowed to give testimony. Witnesses will be called in order of those first in favor, second opposed, and then third as interested may appear. The committee may ask questions to the zoning staff and applicant. It is necessary that we set a reasonable time limit on individual statements on the overall length of the hearing. To promote orderly discussion, anyone wishing to present oral testimony or ask questions relating to the hearing should state your name and present your testimony or questions so it becomes part of the official record. We request you avoid repetition. Once the committee has all the necessary facts, the chairman will close the hearing, allowing no further testimony, and the committee will deliberate and decide for the public whether the applicant has met the standards in the ordinance. No additional testimony from the public is allowed during deliberation. However, the committee may ask questions to staff for purposes of clarification. After a decision is made, the committee will proceed to the next hearing. Many of the decisions made by the committee are a recommendation to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, who will take up the matter at a future county board meeting. Please contact staff for more information regarding this county board process. We will begin by hearing the application of 5A1, Terrence Marsh, General Agriculture to Rural Estate, Town of River Falls, and we will begin with the staff report from Garrett. And Garrett, I'll swear you in. Garrett, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
All right. This is the petition to rezone land for Terrence Marsh. The staff report, November 29th, 2022, of the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Terrence Marsh, residing at 2701 North 8th Street, Wausau, Wisconsin, 54403. The property owner is Terrence Marsh, residing at the same address. Location of the rezone, the area proposed to be rezoned is on the corner of Rock Falls Road and Nugget Falls Trail. The petition of Terrence Marsh to amend the General Code of Ordinances for Marathon County, Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands from general agriculture to rural estate described as part of the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 32, Township 29 North, Range 5 East, Town of Rib Falls. The area proposed to be rezoned is described as Lot 1 of the certified survey map as recorded in Volume 65 on page 99 as document number 1464683, parcel pin number 0662905321091. Public hearings, the Town of Rib Falls Town Board met on October 11, 2022, and the Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, November 29th, 2022 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. The existing zoning district is general agriculture. The existing land use map for the town of Rib Falls from the comprehensive plan 2017 shows the area proposed to be rezoned is agriculture and residential in the town's comprehensive plan. Adjacent land uses are comprised of agriculture and residential. The proposed zoning district is rural estate. The area proposed to be rezoned is shown as agriculture and residential in the town's comprehensive future land use map from 2017. Adjacent land uses are comprised of agriculture, forestry, and residential. The town of Rib Falls does not participate in farmland preservation. This is the aerial photo of the property. This is the certified survey map. On October 11, 2022, the Town of Rib Falls Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Staff comments regarding ERC conclusions of law. The rezoning is substantially consistent with the following plans. Note how the proposed relates to the future land use plan and the vision, goals, objectives, and policies of the plan. Marathon County Comprehensive Plan, Town Comprehensive Plan, and Marathon County Farmland Preservation Plan. The Marathon County Comprehensive Plan relies on the town comprehensive plans regarding specific land uses and zoning districts for individual parcels. The area proposed to be rezoned is shown to be designated as agriculture and residential in the town's future land use map. CPZ staff rely on the towns to make these recommendations, given the town board members and residents know their town and the true purpose and intent of the plan. The area in question was not designated as farmland preservation area. The town of Rib Falls does not participate in farmland preservation zoning. As indicated by the town's future land use map and the resolution recommendation, it appears the rezone is consistent with the purpose and intent of the comprehensive plan. The location of the proposed development minimizes the amount of agricultural land converted and will not be substantially impaired or limit current or future agricultural use of other protected farmland. No farmland will be consumed. The applicant has demonstrated that there is a need for the proposed development. Adequate public facilities are present or will be provided. Note impacts on roads, water, sewage, drainage, schools, emergency services, etc. And providing public facilities will not be an unreasonable burden to the local government. The need is for the proposed land division. All necessary public facilities are anticipated to be provided, if not already provided, given any proposed development would rely on public systems such as a private well and sanitary system if applicable. No anticipated burden on local government. All applicable building, construction, and use standards will be applied during the zoning and building permit review process. The rezoning will not cause unreasonable air and water pollution, soil erosion, or adverse effects on rare or irreplaceable natural areas. All federal, state, and local permits and approvals are required for any applicable development on site. Additionally, the proposed rezone will likely not result in any unreasonable air and water pollution, as all pertinent regulations apply and will need to be adhered to. Any disturbance greater than 1 acre would need a DNR stormwater management permit. The town has approved the proposed rezone. The Town of Rib Falls Town Board has recommended approval of this rezone petition. All concerns from other agencies on the proposed rezone have been addressed. The DNR, Highway, DOT. What are the concerns? The county was not made aware of any concerns from other agencies. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved, staff recommends that the town of Rib Falls amend their comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. Any questions for staff? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Supervisor Drabek.
Thank you. That would be Town of Rib Falls, not Ween, right?
Correct. It was-
Okay, thank you, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Moving on, we will move to public testimony. I'm going to make a note to anybody wishing to provide testimony today because we've had this occurrence the past couple months where individuals will just say that they're here to answer questions. If that is the case, it's best that you be sworn in so that you can provide that testimony. That way, if the committee has any questions of the applicant, they can ask them and you can provide them immediately. So if you get sworn in, it's not that you're being forced to provide any testimony. It's that if there are any questions or if you do want to provide testimony, you can do so. I'm not forcing any applicants to testify. I'm just making a note of that. If you want to provide any information, it's best that you be sworn in so that we can follow our process. That being said, the order that we call applicants forward to testify would be those first in favor of the request. So I would ask that if anybody's here in person to provide testimony, that you approach the mic at this time, or if you're joining us over WebEx, to mute yourself and identify yourself at this time. And this is for 5A1 Terrence Marsh, General Agriculture to Rural Estate. So anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone, please identify yourself at this time. I'll call again. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone, please identify yourself at this time. Just to be sure, we don't have Terrence Marsh joining us, do we?
Yes, we do.
Oh, we do.
He is available if you have questions for him.
Oh, okay. I'll call again. Anybody else wishing to testify in favor of the proposed request? Seeing and hearing none. Moving on. Anybody wishing to speak against the request, please identify yourself at this time. I'll call again. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing and hearing none. Anybody wishing to speak as interested in the proposed request, 5A1, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak as interested in the proposed rezone request? Okay. If no one else wishes to testify for this application, I am now declaring the public hearing on Terrence Marsh, General Agriculture to Rural Estate, Town of Rib Falls, now closed. The committee will now deliberate on the application and apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. What is the pleasure of the committee? Supervisor Drabek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would make a motion to approve the rezone of Terrence Marsh from general agriculture to rural estate based on findings of fact and conclusions of law as reported by staff and also the town recommendation.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Shapinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to 5A2, Dan and Caroline Krimmer, rural residential to general agriculture, Town of Plover, and we're going to hand it back to Garrett.
This is the petition to rezone land for Daniel and Carolyn Krimmer. Staff report November 29, 2022 for the Environmental Resources Committee. Petitioner is Daniel and Carolyn Krimmer, residing at 182779 Sportsman Drive, Burnhamwood, Wisconsin, 54414. The property owners are Daniel and Carolyn Krimmer, residing at the same address. Area proposed to be rezoned is on Sportsman's Drive between Hatchery Road and North Pole Road on the south side of the road. The petition of Dan and Carolyn Krimmer to amend the General Code of Ordinances for Marathon County, Chapter 17, zoning code to rezone lands from rural residential to general agriculture described as part of the northwest quarter of Section 14, Township 29 North, Range 10 East, Town of Plover. The area proposed to be rezoned is described as Lot 1 of the certified survey map as recorded in Volume 41, page 75, number 10052, document number 1126171, parcel pin 062291014209993. Town of Plover, Town Board met November 15, 2022. The Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, November 29, 2022 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. The existing zoning district is rural residential. The Town of Plover's comprehensive plan from 2005 shows the area to be rezoned as cropland and residential in the comprehensive existing land use map. Adjacent land uses are comprised of woodlands, other agriculture, cropland, and single-family residential. The proposed zoning district is general agriculture. The town comprehensive future land use map shows the area to be rezoned as cropland and single-family residential. Adjacent land uses are comprised of recreation, cropland, other agriculture, forest land, and single-family residential. The town of Plover does not participate in farmland preservation. This is the aerial photo of the property. This is the CSM. On November 15, 2022, the Town of Plover Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Staff comments regarding EIC conclusions of law. The rezoning is substantially consistent with the following plans. Note how the proposed relates to the future land use plan and the vision, goals, objectives, and policies of the plan. Marathon County Comprehensive Plan, Town Comprehensive Plan, and Marathon County Farmland Preservation Plan. The Marathon County Comprehensive Plan relies on the Town Comprehensive Plan regarding specific land uses and zoning districts for individual parcels. The area proposed to be rezoned is shown to be designated as cropland and single-family residential in the town's future land use map. CPZ staff rely on the towns to make these recommendations, given the town board members and residents know their town and the true purpose and intent of the plan. The area in question was not designated as farmland preservation area. The town of Plover does not participate in farmland preservation zoning. As indicated by the town's future land use map and resolution recommendation, it appears the rezone is consistent with the purpose and intent of the comprehensive plan. The location of the proposed development minimizes the amount of agricultural land converted and will not substantially impair or limit current or future agricultural use of other protected farmland. No farmland will be consumed. The applicant has demonstrated that there is a need for the proposed development. Adequate public facilities are present or will be provided. Note impacts on roads, water, sewage, drainage, schools, emergency services, etc. And providing public facilities will not be an unreasonable burden to the local government. The need is for a lot combination and to facilitate the expansion of a structure greater than the size limitations of the current district. All necessary public facilities are anticipated to be provided, if not already provided, given any proposed development would rely on private systems such as a private well and sanitary system if applicable. No anticipated burden on local government. All applicable building, construction, and use standards will be applied during the zoning and building permit review process. The rezoning will not cause unreasonable air and water pollution, soil erosion, or adverse effects on rare or irreplaceable natural areas. All federal, state, and local permits and approvals are required for any applicable development on site. Additionally, the proposed rezone will likely not result in any unreasonable air and water pollution, as all pertinent regulations may apply and will need to be adhered to. Any disturbance greater than 1 acre would need a DNR stormwater management permit. The town has recommended the proposed rezone of the property. The Town of Plover Town Board has recommended approval of this rezone. All concerns from other agencies on the proposed rezone have been addressed: DNR, Highway, DOT. What are the concerns? The county was not made aware of any concerns from other agencies. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved, staff recommend that the Town of Plover amend their comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change.
All right, any questions? Seeing and hearing none, thank you, Garrett. Moving on, anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request, then we are on item 5A2, Dan and Caroline Krimmer. Please either unmute yourself over WebEx or approach the microphone at this time. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of item 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. Last call, anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing and hearing none. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request for 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. Last call, anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. Okay. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for item 5A2, Dan and Caroline Krimmer, please identify yourself at this time. Last call, anybody wishing to speak as interested, please identify yourself at this time. No one else wishes to testify for this application. I am now declaring the public hearing on Dan and Caroline Krimmer, rural residential to general agriculture, town of Plover, now closed. The committee will now deliberate on the application and apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. What is the pleasure of the committee? Supervisor Ritter.
I would like to recommend to approve the petition of Dan and Carolyn Krimmer to amend the General Code of Ordinances for Marathon County, Chapter 17, to rezone lands from rural residential to general agriculture in the town of Plover due to staff recommendations, finding of facts, and conclusion of law.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Drabek. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. All right, and the last one that we have in this group, Riverside Land Surveying, Nathan Winchester on behalf of Thomas and Nicole Bukowski, General Agriculture to Rural Estate, Town of Reed. Back to Garrett.
This is the petition to rezone land for Thomas and Nicole Bukowski. Staff report, November 29, 2022, Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Riverside Land Surveying, Nathan Winston, residing at 5310 Willow Street, Weston, Wisconsin 54476. The property owners are Thomas and Nicole Bukowski, residing at 212183 County Road Y, Hatley, Wisconsin 54440. Area proposed to be rezoned is on the corner of Christoph Road and County Road Y. The petition of Riverside Land Surveying Nathan Winston on behalf of Thomas and Nicole Bukowski to amend the General Code of Ordinances for Marathon County, Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands from general agriculture to rural estate described as part of the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter and the southwest quarter of the of Section 26, Township 27 North, Range 6 East, Town of Reed. The area proposed to be rezoned is described as Lot 1 of the preliminary CSM. Parent parcel is PIN number 064-2709-263-0980 and 064-2709-263-0989. The Town of Reed Town Board met on October 11, 2022. Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, November 29, 2002 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. The existing zoning district is general agriculture. The Town of Reed's existing land use map from 2007, the area proposed to be rezoned is shown as cropland in the town's comprehensive plan. Adjacent land uses are comprised of woodlands, cropland, and other agriculture, and single-family residential. The proposed zoning district is rural estate. The area proposed to be rezoned is shown as cropland and forest land in the town's comprehensive future land use map. Adjacent land uses are comprised of woodlands, cropland, other agriculture, and single-family residential. The Town of Reed does not participate in farmland preservation. Here's the aerial photos of the property. The CSM. On October 11, 2022, the Town of Reed Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Staff comments regarding ERC conclusions of law. The rezoning is substantially consistent with the following plans. Note how the proposed relates to the future land use plan and the vision, goals, objectives, and policies of the plan. Marathon County Comprehensive Plan, Town Comprehensive Plan, and Marathon County Farmland Preservation Plan. Marathon County Conservation Plan Comprehensive Plan relies on the town's comprehensive plan regarding specific land uses and zoning districts for individual parcels. The area proposed to be rezoned is shown to be designated as cropland in the town's future land use map. CPZ staff rely on the towns to make these recommendations, given the town board members and residents know their town and the true purpose and intent of the plan. The area in question was not designated as farmland preservation area. The town of Reed does not participate in farmland preservation zoning. As indicated by the town's future land use map and resolution recommendation, it appears the rezone is consistent with the purpose and intent of the comprehensive plan. The location of the proposed development minimizes the amount of agricultural land converted and will not substantially impair or limit current or future agriculture use of other protected farmland. No farmland will be consumed. The applicant has demonstrated that there is a need for the proposed development. Adequate public facilities are present or will be provided. Note impacts on road, water, sewage, drainage, schools, emergency services, etc. And providing public facilities will not be an unreasonable burden to the local government. The need is for proposed land division. All necessary public facilities are anticipated to be provided, if not already provided, given any proposed development would rely on private systems such as a private well and sanitary system if applicable. No anticipated burden on local government. All applicable building, construction, and use standards will be applied during the zoning and building permit review process. The rezoning will not cause unreasonable air and water pollution, soil erosion, or adverse effects on rare or irreplaceable natural areas. All federal, state, and local permits and approvals are required for any applicable development on site. Additionally, the proposed rezone will likely not result in any unreasonable air and water pollution, as all pertinent regulations apply and will need to be adhered to. Any disturbance greater than 1 acre would need a DNR stormwater management permit. The town has approved the proposed rezone of the property. The Town of Reed Town Board has recommended approval of this rezone petition. All concerns from other agencies on the proposed rezone have been addressed. DNR, Highway, DOT. What are those concerns? The county was not made aware of any concerns from other agencies. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved, staff recommends the Town of Reed to amend their comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change.
All right, thank you, Garrett. Any questions? Seeing and hearing none. Thanks again. All right, public testimony. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of 5A3 Riverside Land Surveying, Nathan Winstonson, on behalf of Thomas and Nicole Bukowski. If you're joining us over WebEx, please unmute yourself and identify yourself at this time, or please approach the microphone at this time. I'll call again. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request for 5A3, please identify yourself at this time. Last call.
Melissa Thrun, I don't have anything really to say, but I am available to answer any questions should I need to.
I'm staring at Corp Counsel. You did not wish to testify, Nicole? Is that what I heard?
I don't really have anything to say. I'm sorry, I don't really know what I'm doing, but
Well, Nicole,
just in case I was told to be here. It's Melissa.
I'm sorry, Melissa. What is your full name?
Melissa Thrun. I'm going to be the property owner, so I'm here on behalf of them.
Okay, so Melissa, when we get into situations like this, like I talked about earlier, it's best to be sworn in. It's just a real quick process. That way, if there are any questions, then the committee can ask them to the applicant.
Sure.
So could you, just for the record, state your name and address, please?
Melissa Thrun, 143173 County Road, NN, Marathon, Wisconsin, 54448.
Okay. And Melissa, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. Because now if there are any questions from the committee, they would be able to ask that during the testimony. That's why we have to do that. So that being said, are there any questions from the committee for Melissa? Okay. Thanks again, Melissa. They didn't have any questions, so we're just going to move on to the next part of the process. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of item 5A3, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing and hearing none. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing and hearing none. Anybody wishing to speak as interested, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak as interested, please identify yourself at this time. No one else wishing to testify for this application. I am now declaring the public hearing on Riverside Land Surveying, Nathan Winsenson, on behalf of Thomas Nicole Bukowski, General Ag to Rural State, Town of Reed, now closed. The committee will now deliberate on the application and apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. What is the pleasure of the committee? Supervisor Seefeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion for the petition of Nathan Winsenson on behalf of Thomas and Nicole Buchkowski to amend the General Code of Ordinance of Marathon County, Chapter 17, zoning code to rezone land from general agriculture to rural rural estate, described as in the town of Reed, and to forward the conclusions of law and to move on to the county board.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Rodney Roskopp. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We are on to 5B, review and possible recommendations to the county board for its consideration. Town zoning changes pursuant to Wisconsin statute 60.62 sub 3. B1, Town of River Mountain, RA-1 to MR-4 and SR-2. Garrett, go ahead.
Yep, just introducing the Town of Rib Mountain's recommendation for rezone. They are not county zoned, but they do have to come through the Environmental Resources Committee and the county board whenever they do rezone request changes. There is a representative from Rib Mountain here to answer any of your questions. We also do have a signed resolution up here for the Town of Rib Mountain.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah, the packet did not include the signed resolution, so that is updated with the signed resolution, so.
So as opposed to give a little bit of background to the committee, as opposed to with their own zoning ordinance and they administer it, a little bit of a different process compared to what we just did with those other hearings. That's the case when these happen. They bring the information forward. If they have questions, we can of course ask them questions to move the process forward. Otherwise, the information was in your packets. Typically, these get approved and they go on to the county board. So, if there are any questions, otherwise, motion be in order. Must be the rain today.
Mr. Chairman, just a question
Yeah.
on procedure. So this is a little bit different process.
Yep.
What exactly is the process at the county board? Does the county board actually have the option to say no, or is it just a process that the town has to go through?
My understanding is that then it's a historical discussion that we've had, so it's a good question. We could say no. They have the power to override us. That's my understanding of it. Corporation Counsel?
That's correct.
Okay.
Under Wisconsin statute 60.62 subsection 3, if a town, even towns that are not participating in county zoning, in a county that has a county zoning ordinance, any changes within the town's ordinance have to be approved by the county board. So if the county board then withholds approval, there's another process that the town can follow.
Any other questions, comments? Corporation Council, as chair, can I make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Supervisor Overbeck with a motion.
I'll make the motion to recommend approval to the county board as submitted, but from the town of Rhode Mountain for the RA 130, 135 acre rural agricultural to mixed residential MR4 and suburban residential SR2 as submitted by the town of Rhode Mountain.
Motion's made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Sherfinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. B2, Town of Wausau, Commercial Light Manufacturing District to Agricultural Transition District.
There is a representative here from the town of Wausau via WebEx.
So very similar, that with the town's administration of the ordinance, very similar to the town of Rhode Mountain. That's essentially the district, the difference between the two, as far as the process and the statute there, with 60.62 sub 3. So, are there any questions to the representative from the town of Wausau? I guess I have while everybody's reviewing that information, I have a question for Corporation Council. So with these rezones here, with the item 5A, those three above, they could still have their own town zoning ordinance for those as well, but they still come in front of us. So then what is the difference between those three there under A and the two under B below?
Well, that's a fine question, Mr. Chair.
I thought it was something with the administration of the ordinance, but even if you have your own town zoning, you're responsible for the administration of the ordinance anyway.
That is correct. If you wouldn't mind, I'll take some time to research that and I can get back to you.
Sure.
Great.
Okay. So, a motion to approve would be in order, unless you would like to wait for Corporation Council to get the response back to us. Well, what I will do is move on to items under C, and we will come back to B2 while the Corporation Council does some research. Moving on to C, review and possible recommendations to County Board for its consideration. C1, approve the annual county forest work plan, and we have our county forester, Tom Loveland, with us.
Thank you. Thank you. No. Hello? Thank you, Mr. Chair. So each year, the county board and committees have to approve a county forest work plan for the upcoming year to be eligible for grant funding, which is done down under the fiscal impact on the resolution. Just about an hour ago, the Forestry Recreation Committee went through the work plan. I answered questions for them on the work plan, and you guys have that in your packet. So I guess I just asked if you have any questions on the work plan, I can answer them. Otherwise, we'd be asking for the committee to accept the work plan with any changes that you might have and forward on to the county board for the December meeting.
Okay, the plan was in your packets for review for today, so if you have any questions for Tom, now would be the time. Supervisor Drabek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, it was just a question I had. It was, on page 86, under number 10, it says issue approximately 25 firewood permits. So do you do this on stuff that was logged over? Or do people just come in and just cut down trees? And how much wood can they take? I'm just kind of a general knowledge of that because I didn't notice it before on there, so.
Sure. So typically, after a timber sale is cut and hauled, we offer a permit to the general public to go in and cut up to 10 loggers cords of wood, mostly tops. We do not allow any cutting of live trees, only dead and down material that's on the forest floor. And they can come in and get a permit for $30 for 90 days.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Tom? All right. So this would go to the county board for its approval in December then. So, any other questions? Not a motion to approve would be in order. Supervisor Seefeld.
Make a motion that we accept the forestry, or recreation and forest department's work plan for 2023.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Drabek. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. C2, application for county forest acreage share loan payment. Tom.
Thank you. So this is a resolution to ask the DNR to approve a $15,000 and some change interest-free loan to be used for forest maintenance, development, preservation, and purchasing of county forest land. Basically, this is a loan that's paid back through a 20% severance tax when we cut timber. And we pay back way more than $15,000 every year. So we just take it as a initial front to purchase. And the history of this is we've used it for capital projects and or land acquisition, matches to the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program. So we have a little bit of a balance there in case something comes up for purchase. We have a 50% match. But we can use it for basically anything to do with county forest and county forest maintenance and development. So the resolution is in your packet, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Tom? So I was not aware that you could do that. The Knowles Nelson, it was beyond just the purchasing; it was also for the maintenance of the land as well. I was unaware of that.
So we can use the DNR interest-free loan to match the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a match. So we have it in we take that DNR money, we put it in our state aid forestry account, and that can build up, and then we'd have that money to match the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program.
Got it. Okay. Any questions for Tom? Okay. Motion to approve would be in order. Supervisor Ritter?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application for the county forest acreage share loan payment.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Vensky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. C3, revisions to Marathon County General Code, Chapter 16. Is that you, Shad, or?
That'll be me again.
Oh, I'm all over the place. Sorry,
I'm on a roll today. So this is a county forest ordinance that we're revising or attempting to revise. It's pretty simple language. We had a mistake in the ordinance that we found. We've been charging a fee for that. for some time, so we're cleaning that up. And we're also adding some language that a camping party may be allowed up to a maximum of 3 1 to 14-day camping permits per calendar year. And they must leave the forest for 7 days before applying for the next permit. And that is, that language matches sort of the camping language that we have at Big Old Plain and Dells the Eau Claire Park. The reason that we're looking to add this language is the permits are primarily for folks that go out and camp or hike or bike or hunt or use the county forest. Typically, there's been not one individual that's come for more than 3 camping permits per calendar year. But we have been getting some folks that come back and ask for a camping permit. 14 days, they'll come back and ask for another one, they'll ask for another one, they'll ask for another one. And typically the permits are available for those folks that want to use the county forest, but not primarily set up a livable situation.
Okay. So this is just an update to reflect what's actually in practice then for the campers that are coming to camp in the forest.
That is correct. And it's an undesignated camping permit, which is different from camping in a campground, which they have amenities in campgrounds. They have bathrooms and picnic tables and fire rings and stuff. We only offer in most locations, except for 9 Mile, just a place to park your camper or pitch your tent. And they have to bring in and take out everything that they bring with them.
Okay. All right. Any questions from the committee? Seeing and hearing none, motion to approve would be in order.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Supervisor Orbeck to approve, second by Supervisor Shafinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to Chapter 19, and I believe we have Parks Director Polly with us for that one.
Yes, thank you. So at the end of the year, we do, as Tom just said, we do some cleanup of our ordinances based a lot on what our recreation deputies have given us feedback on throughout the year of them going in and enforcing what we have in the park. So a couple of the things that we are updating is one of our areas of depositing and leaving residential commercial belongings or waste materials. This came up because not everything that people leave in the parks is considered waste. So we updated that it is against our ordinance just to leave items within the park and not dispose of them properly or take them with you. And then we had a cleanup, and if you look down on the ATV, UTV, we had one item that says paved roads or established roads, and then this one, E, said paved roads. We do allow ATVs and UTVs now throughout the parks on the roads, established roads. They're not all paved. If you go into the campgrounds, our campground roads aren't paved, so we changed that just as a clarity there that it's established roads versus paved. And then the Chapter 19.084, that is to add to the language we've had in there about our cross-country ski trails. It's also on our groomed snowshoe trails. So we do take time and effort and have staff out there grooming snowshoe and ski trails. And we've had a number of people that once you walk on it and hike on it, it takes away that experience and it ruins that trail. It's a lot of staff time that we put into that. So we're asking people to use the trails as what they're groomed for during those seasons. The rest of the year, they're open for all uses. And then a clarity to our camping capacity. This one is one that we've talked about for a couple years with our recreation deputies, trying to figure out how to word it correctly. But we have a campsite capacity. For most of our sites, you can fit one camping unit and a tent, or possibly 2 tents. We do have some campsites within our parks that you can fit more than a tent. These are the tents you stay in. They don't include the tents where your food is under and are over picnic tables. But to tried to make sure that people aren't going into the forested area and taking away from the natural resource part of it. We are saying that no more than 2 sleeping units can occupy a campsite. 2 units may consist of that travel trailer and a tent, or 2 tents, but you can't have 2 campers on a site. Our sites just aren't large enough for that. So up to 2 per site. We also in there have also information on the number of people that could be in a campsite, and that's not changing. So those are our recommended updates to our Chapter 19 Parks Ordinance.
Okay. Any questions for Parks Director? Seeing and hearing none, all the changes had justification behind them. What was the pleasure of the committee? Supervisor Seefeld.
I make a motion to approve the updates for the Park and Rec to Code Chapter 19.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Drabek. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. On to C5, adoption of West Side Master Plan. I don't know.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Environmental Resources Committee. We're bringing this forward to tonight. It's our Marathon County West Side Master Plan that we've been working on for the past year. We have given updates to our Park Commission. We did present this to the HR Finance Committee meeting last week, and we're asking this now to go to the County Board for adoption of this West Side Master Plan. This is in draft form, so there are some areas in here that we have to tweak. We do know that we made a mistake. The consultant wrote down some streets versus avenues, so we'll get that all fixed. But we are going through, we'll be doing some update of that. The main area of here that I want to show you is the actual plan itself, which we can talk through these different areas here. And then you can ask any questions that you might have. This is something, like I said, this West Side Master Plan update started earlier this year. We did provide a community survey where we had over 2,000 respondents respond to that survey. Then we had some concept designs from that, and we also had a public meeting at Eastgate Hall in which we had about 35 participants come and look at different concepts. And then we opened up a second survey that allowed people to comment on the amenities within each concept plan. So they didn't necessarily pick a concept, but they could talk about the roadways in this plan versus that plan, or where the horse barn is going to be. We also worked with our Fair Board. We had them look at the plan. I did meet with them again about 2 weeks ago, where we made some changes even since. I've met with them to talk about the future here, because this park, the goal of this park and this West Side Master Plan as a couple of things. One is to really look at Marathon Park and how it's used in this community, how it's visualized for safety, for the natural beauty of it, for different uses that are needed within that park based on the size. And then it's also to look at some of the areas within the UW Stevens Point at Wassa campus, such as the dormitory and some vacant lots that they have, as well as looking at West Street, which is the area south of the railroad tracks, south of Marathon Park, where our current highway and parks facility is. When this was started earlier this year, this did go to the Infrastructure Committee for direction on how we were proceeding with this plan. The direction we received from the Infrastructure Committee was that we are to assume Parks and Highway are moving out of this area to a different location, and that county-owned property should be looked at as redevelopment. So that is what was the precedence for this plan going forward. So we did have a committee that worked on this plan. It was myself, it was a member from Facilities and Capital Management, it was a representative from UWSP at Wassa, it was City Planning Department, as well as, like I said, the multiple community outreach. We worked with all the user groups of the park and stuff like that to get to where we are now today. So one of the big, I'll kind of walk through the area within this plan. It does talk through each one of these numbered areas. I will go through this plan. I'm not going to go through each one specifically, but if you have any questions, let me know. But one of the biggest changes is kind of the road system throughout the park. You'll notice that this northeast quadrant, the road that's currently there, is not shown on this plan. Bear with me, I've got a cold, so. This is to kind of take away that roadway that in discussions wasn't necessarily needed other than the parking for the university. And that is something that we're going to work with the university on. Many people are parking in the park because it's free rather than parking on university parking that they have to pay for. So that is something that we need to work with the university on to get people to use their parking. They do pay the county to plow some of these parking spaces. So they're not only having their students not pay for their own parking, and then they're paying the county to have it plowed. So that's something that we're going to look at. But taking out that northern road makes this northeast quadrant a more usable family space. It gives us the option to expand the train, take our splash pad out of the middle of the train so that it's more accessible, and put it to the area north of the junction. That is where our current restroom facility is. That restroom facility would be removed and put within a new junction. Our current junction is in need of quite a bit of maintenance. It's not functional for our uses right now. It's something that I have had on my work plan since I started 5 years ago by our previous administrator, is to really look at what the uses of Marathon Junction are, because it's supposed to be an enterprise fund, and right now it does not function properly to sustain itself. So this would be a new junction that would include restrooms, locker rooms for that splash pad, a community space, potentially a new concessionaire that could also possibly be like a beer garden. It could have skate rentals for some of the amenities we have outside. And it would be more of a community gathering space that would replicate more of the fair buildings within the park that will remain. So it will tie these buildings together. Right now, the junction has no resemblance at all to any of the other buildings within the park.
Jamie, I have a very quick question regarding the existing road infrastructure that is in the park versus what's on the proposed or idealized plan for the document here. The west side for this plan right here, it still looks like there's, I don't know if those are walkways or roadways back in there. Is that correct?
On the west side,
Yeah.
those are still roadways, but they would be, in this plan, this loop that's to the west side would actually be closed to regular vehicle traffic. It would be a maintenance vehicle only, and it would be serve as a walking path. But with the amount of trees in here and the damage we have during storms, we have to be able to get our machines in and out of there. So originally, the consultant had just put trails in there, but we have to be able to get in and out to do maintenance on those trees. So it is not a public road, but it would be opened up during the fair for parking, if that's part of your question. So this is still a road that could be utilized during the fair to allow the parking on the west end of the park.
My only comment was that in regards to usage of the park, and you can see that in that scattergram that's at the end, that a lot of residents, I think, in that neighborhood utilize that area for walking. And I was curious as to whether or not the traffic going back in there would impact that or not. The other thing that I was going to ask in regards to the parking, and granted, I went to, back then, UW Marathon County, when there was higher enrollment, but I was one of those students that didn't pay for parking and parked out on those side roads there because there wasn't any room in that parking lot that's right across from the UWSP area. In fact, the parking lot on that side by CCE and the other parking lot behind, you couldn't park there either. There just wasn't enough room. So what a lot of students did, if you couldn't find a parking spot toward the north there, and you couldn't find a parking spot across in that other parking lot, they just went down and parked by the exhibition hall. So I feel like even if you do that and you close that off, they're still going to find a way to find free parking. That's not really going to change anything, even if you try and start making them pay for it either. Even with the reduced enrollment, there's not enough parking there. Because when I drive past even now, there's always a handful of cars that are out parked on the side.
Yeah, it's still used, definitely. And that's a discussion I think the university has to have, and we've had that with them. They need to figure out, do they want to charge for parking? Or do they want their students on their campus? This plan does call for redevelopment of that one lot across Stewart Avenue because it's not utilized right now, so they have a plan for proposed housing there. Nothing more high density than townhomes, but it could be even less dense to single-family homes there as well. So, and then the main road through the park is the kind of the difference. It's still there, but we slow it down a little bit with some roundabouts and some boulevards. Right now, what we have an issue with is the speeding through the park. They come through, and then they use the big gravel area, which is our midway, as a racetrack. They do donuts. It's quite unsafe for the most part. So the goal is to get more green space in here and get rid of some of the gravel. And have it be more of a park, Central Park-like feel. That does change where the fair would have their midway significantly. Did you have a question?
Oh, go ahead. I'll let you finish where you're going.
Okay, so that, in this area right now is our pickleball court. So this is, as I mentioned, this is a long-term plan. This is a 15-year plus plan. So long-term, the idea would be to move the pickleball courts out of the center of that grass space, and then this area would be utilized for the midway. We did have the midway kind of south of the grandstand in talking with the fair board. That is not going to work. They need this area for parking, for their large events such as their rodeo, their derby. So this would remain parking for them, for access for that. And then the fair midway may change a little bit, but it would still utilize, it would connect the grandstand. We would make a grander area in here between the exhibition building and the multipurpose room to tie in where all the food trucks would be and the agricultural side of the fair, so that all of it is connected versus in its own little area of the fair.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the proposed moving of the splash pad. And my point here in bringing that up is that we were users of that area many years ago, and before it was a splash pad. And at that point in time, it was a small wading pool. And the comments that we got from a number of other people, and we shared as well, is that we just look at the splash pad as an absolute step backwards. Because what do you do from a safety standpoint? What is the very first rule about water play and pools? Don't run by the pool. What is a splash pad? It is absolutely a red flag and a safety hazard. So I guess what I would suggest is that we maybe revisit the whole concept of a splash pad, because from what we've seen, and granted it's hardly a scientific study, but it seemed to be that the area in the usage went down dramatically when it converted from the wading pool to the splash pad. And like Supervisor Langenhan, I also attended University Marathon County, and the students greatly appreciated the ability to park over there because there was nowhere near the amount of parking necessary in the local area. So I think that's a viable use for the park.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you for that. Yeah, the idea of the splash pad is, in our experience, we could make our splash pad much nicer than what it is. Having it in the middle of the train tracks isn't a very good place for it at the moment either when kids have to cross the train tracks. It's aged, it's very, very aged. So there's new ways of doing things that would engage more. One of the benefits of a splash pad versus a wading pool is that it doesn't necessarily have to be staffed. So it's more cost effective to the county to have something like that. Where a wading pool, anytime you have standing water of over 2 inches, they have to have a lifeguard on duty. So by taking it out of the train tracks area, it could be like the city of Green Bay has multiple free splash pad. So it would be a place to cool off that's free to our community. It doesn't have to be staffed. But that's something, all of these areas, so these are all concept, as I mentioned. As we go in, if this is the concept that the county board supports in kind of the ideas of all of it, then as we go and to get ready to develop one area or the other, we would really look at what the design is of it. We got to look at the utilities, got to get an architect on costs and stuff like that. So that is that area. We would the number 8 is a new playground. So right now the playground by the junction is a very small, no play value playground. The idea is that would come out anyway as part of our playground replacement program, and this would be a larger community-based playground to complement the new one we just put in the wooded area in the middle of the park. Then we also have a skating ribbon that could be added here. Last year when we had the pond hockey at Marathon Park and we just made a big sheet of ice and we plowed a trail, it was a huge hit. People loved it. So I think that would be something that could be heavily used. And then the other part of the park that's a major to talk about is the fair buildings. As you see here, none of them changed significantly. The number 15 and number 16, those are historic on the historic registry. Those can't be, so those would be maintained and kept up as we plan to keep them up in their historic way. Number 14 is our Eastgate Hall. That's something that we see, even without this plan, as a potential for the county to really do some investment in. It is a revenue generator facility for us now. It's heavily used for family gatherings, meetings, get-togethers, weddings. But it could, with just a little bit of updates to it, acoustics in the inside of it, maybe a new entrance to make it more attractive, it could be more heavily used and more sought after for those larger events, which would in turn generate revenue. Then the bigger side of it, looking at number 17, is our current multi-purpose buildings. Right now, we have 2 sheets of ice from September through March, and then the rest of the year, it is open for some different events. It is used by the fair for livestock. That facility is in desperate need of repair. We have been limping it along the last couple of years. We just fixed the membrane roof that's in between the two. It's a flat roof in between 2 sloped roofs, which is never a good plan, but we're making it work. And the equipment that's making our ice and running our ice today, the county bought used from the city of Eagle River in 1974. So we have been keeping it running since 1974. And it is still running, and we're going to keep it running as long as we can, but it's getting to a point where it has to be addressed. So there is a need for ice. This facility right now can't have year-round ice. There is no insulation to it, so it's not built for any warm weather. The ice won't hold. And talking with our user groups, we have not only youth hockey, we have figure skating, we have adult leagues, we have the high schools use it, we have a higher level team that brings in revenue and brings in visitors to our area, that we have demand for at least 1 sheet of year-round ice, potentially 2. So the idea with this long-term plan, as I mentioned, is that this facility that's in the current highway area would be a new 2-sheet ice arena with an indoor turf space. And the idea at this point would be that 1 sheet would be year-round ice, 1 sheet would not be until the demand is there, but we would enter into contracts with all of our users and get more users, so that would be a revenue-generating facility as well. It's very hard to replace the current one where it is because it's going to take longer than 4 months to redo an ice arena, which puts all of our users out with no space to go if we were to just build it where it currently is. So that would be one area, one major, and when you look at the funding part of it, that's the biggest cost, is that facility.
Question for you. What analysis has been done relative to going to a year-round facility relative to the competition, if we will, between a Marathon Park facility and the Greenheck facility? I mean, we already have that in the if you will, the metropolitan area. So has that been considered, and in what detail?
Yes, we would finish a complete feasibility study before we actually build it to know what we're going to build. But yes, we have been in constant contact with the Greenheck Ice Facility. All of our users go there. It's only year-round ice sheet in the entire area, and it is packed. It's used heavily, and people are demanding more ice. So we are getting the numbers from them. We have different numbers from our youth hockey groups as to what camps they could run that they can't now because they don't have a facility to go to. So we would do before we get to exactly what we're going to build, we would get all those numbers for you to show you what that return on investment would be. But just talking with Greenheck, working with them, working with our user groups, there is currently not enough ice for the demand with that one facility.
Is the expectation that this would be self-supporting in terms of revenue?
It depends if you take the debt service as part of that. If we build this through a public-private partnership and we don't have a lot of debt service on it, depending on how we program it, it could be something that could potentially make money or break even. I think it's all how we program it. But if the county were to purchase or were to build a big part of it and we had a big debt service, then that is the question. We'd have to run those numbers. I can't say that for sure.
Go ahead, Supervisor.
Thank you. Well, what about the highway department? Where are you going to put it?
We don't know yet.
Oh, don't you think you should know that before we do this?
Well, as I mentioned, this is a long-term plan, and before we did this, we went to the infrastructure committee who gave us direction on what we should do with that. So, obviously the ice arena cannot be built until highway's gone or the ice arena gets put in a different location. Other things too is we can't redo the roads until we have a place to really put the pickleball court. So there's a lot of things as we do this over the next 15 to 20 years that have to fall in line before you can get certain areas completed. So, yeah.
Good, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think these questions are great questions to illustrate not only the additional work that needs to be done, but also kind of where we are. Like Jamie said, this is a master plan document similar to master plans that the county board has put in place for various other facilities. There is a master plan for this courthouse complex that gives staff direction long-term. Like Jamie said, we're talking 20, 50 years out about what the future of this property is going to look like. None of this, anything that's on there to be built in terms of planning, you all have the opportunity through your annual budget process and any capital consideration process to look at that at a future date. To the question before about the further evaluation, to Supervisor Sherfinsky's point about the ice sheets, that's a great analysis that we would need to do. We need to know, before we do that, the policy question for this body, one of the first policy questions is, do you want to be in the ice sheet business? That is not a mandated government service. There's been conversation about what is mandated and what is not. That's not. The vast majority of this is not, absent some of the agreements we have with the Fair Board in terms of operating the property that we receive from relative to the fair for the whole entire Marathon Park. But that's the direction we need. We need to do all those things, absolutely, but we're not going to go through the process of doing that additional evaluation and additional work if you tell us, hey, this is not something we want to do. That's why master plans are important. For those of you that have been on the board for a couple of terms, you know that a couple of years ago we purchased property. When I talk about the courthouse master plan, that master plan called for the county to acquire property on this courthouse block. We did that based on that master plan a couple of years ago with a parcel immediately to the east of this courthouse. Based on that master plan, but as I alluded to before, we brought that back to the full county board before we went and spent the money to do it. So it's kind of I hate to use an analogy of chicken and egg, but we need to know what you want us to do before we start doing all the planning to do it. That's really what this is. What is the vision for Marathon Park for the next 50 years. To your point, Supervisor Drabeck, we're not going to move the highway department tomorrow. If I had a place to put it tomorrow, I'd let you know. But a lot of the places we've talked about locating a highway department just haven't panned out. But again, the long-term vision is, do you want us to move in this direction to attempt to relocate the highway department and locate some additional recreation programming on that site? That's that high-level policy direction we need. And as Jamie said, we did bring that to the infrastructure committee quite a number of months ago to inform this plan, and that was the direction. Long-term, the highway department's not going to be, in 50 years, we know it shouldn't be there. So, I just want to use that as context setting. That's what this conversation is about. You're absolutely right. The threshold question for this committee and the full board, do you want to be in the ice sheet business? You've been in the ice sheet business for far longer than I've been alive. Do you want to be in it more?
And with that, from our department, I mean, we do it well. We could do it better, and it is something that, within our department we have the expertise to do, and is a revenue generating facility. But
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the concerns I would have, even with that ice arena, would be parking. As far as looking at the overall site, that looks really restricted. As far as when I go to a hockey game or whatever, and you see some of these teams playing, the parking lots are full, and that would be a big concern on this site, especially with an all year-round facility with the fields next to it. So I think one of the things that was looked at in Wausau a while ago was there were semi-pro teams looking at Wausau as far as locating a hockey team here. And I think that should be evaluated as far as what Wausau really wants to do with this, and whether it should be a private venture versus a county venture into the ice arena. I think that's a real concern next to that railroad track, and just the configuration of that site for parking is a concern for larger events. And we all know ice arenas get used for other things also, as far as space utilization. So that would be my concern.
So I don't have any other information on, or I guess anything to share other than looking at the plan and seeing long-term. In this plan feasibility study, there is at the end, some cost estimates based on 2022 dollars. As we mentioned, there is, quite a price tag to doing all this over the next however many years, depending on how we do it. But for one, we don't have final plans done until we start working on what that vision is. And two, it depends on the year that it is. If we start doing some of this work 5 years from now, the costs in there are not going to be relevant. And this is not something that we're asking the county board to approve as far as you're going to approve paying for everything. You're just approving the concept plan, or you're recommending the approval of the concept plan to the county board. And then as we move through working on these items, we figure out where that funding comes from. Some of it may be grants, some of it will definitely be public-private partnership. Some of it may be capital improvements. That's something we'll discuss as we start to implement the plan over the next, 5 to 20 years. So.
What other committees have been involved in the creation of this document, and how many of them have viewed the latest draft that's presented in front of us today?
The Park Commission and the HR Finance Committee.
Did they take any action?
The Park Commission recommended it to the HR Finance Committee. The HR Finance Committee approved the design. I guess that's accepted the design. And so it's coming to you. It was kind of a weird process how we did it, knowing that it had to go to HR Finance, but this usually comes from where the Park Commission goes. So it's coming to you to go to the county board as well, but it's already been the HR Finance, which is...
This version?
Yes, last week, I think we presented it to them. Mm-hmm.
I guess I struggle with the ask of the plan, or the long-term value of it, as far as if this isn't committing us to something, but we have this long-term vision that includes a number of items here, And to the administrator's point about how a lot of things have to go right in order for certain things to come into place here, it just feels like we have this grand vision of the park, but it doesn't seem like there's been, it feels like there's something missing there to me as far as the level of involvement of the county with this in the long-term future of that park. For example, there's a survey question in there. It says 55% of the people that come to the Valley Fair park off-site. Well, if you reduce the parking in that area, you're going to have more people parking off-site, and there's some public safety concerns there. Even in that south side entrance with this new planned roadway on the bottom side there where that goes through, I mean, there's going to be people crossing there. And if there's more residential neighborhoods in the bottom right, or I should say residential developments, there's going to be more traffic there. So that's the piece I struggle with. And it feels like this is this grand design with a lot of asks. And I guess I would like to know, to circle back to a question I'm trying to, what was the original ask with this plan? Like, was it to provide a vision for what Marathon Park looks 30 years from now? Is that what was asked here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, functionality of the park and the area to the south. That's county-owned property. The area that's in the light area is not currently county-owned. And looking what our needs are. So the idea really is to make the park safer, and less gravel is probably the biggest goal, I think, of this plan, because of the safety concerns we have with the people that tear through the middle. But with that, then we have to take into account how the fair works in there. The fair is a major part of this park and needs to be accommodated. And, if you take out the gravel midway, then where does that midway go and how does it work when it rains? How does it drain? That sort of thing. The rest of this, expanding the train, we had a lot of comments on keeping the train because it's a staple to the park, but it's really boring, to put it bluntly. It's only for a certain number of age group, and we want to invite, I think the idea of this park is to get everybody to use it, not the people with families that have kids 5 and under. We want to get everybody to come in the park and utilize it for different purposes, whether it's walking, whether it's the playgrounds, whether it's biking, picnicking. The campground is slated to stay, which was debate about that because of some of the issues that we do currently have with camping in there. But that was slated to stay because of the heavy use during the fair. Really, the biggest part about this, it's not a lot of change to the park other than putting down established roads and established parking lots to make an organizational piece to the park. And then we have to figure out how all the other uses work around that. Marathon Junction is a building that needs to be repurposed one way or the other. It's not functioning as it should. It needs maintenance issues. It could just be taken out altogether, but then what do you do with the splash pad has reached its useful life. These are capital improvement projects, so how does that fit into here? Whether we need it or not, that will be the question. And the ice arena is one that we do have to address. Whether it goes by the highway here, whether it goes to another area within the city, or the county that's identified as land that's available, or, where this 31 is, that cold storage building has to come down. And that's something the county board approved during the budget process, is to keep that funding in there. If this is a need and we have the partnership and the need to do it based on the feasibility study, that could be a place where that facility would go instead. So this is just the idea that these are items that we do need to address. Whether it's a requirement that we extend the train, maybe that's a low priority item. This whole area to the west, in my mind, adding disc golf or a high ropes course is just ideas that could go there, but it's a heavily wooded area. The white pines are something we want to keep and maintain as long as possible, but we have to also look at the long-term benefit of those and the safety of those. So area will stay wooded for people to use on trails and enjoy the park. So that's what we're kind of looking at. Nothing is changing really much with the fair buildings, other than if we can move the horse arena or the horse barns away from the railroad tracks to be adjacent to what this would be a new facility down the road. You know, it puts that all together for all those uses and a little bit more consolidation of those fair items. So although the price tag, I mean, it costs a lot to build new roads and to put in parking lots, but that is, you know, a pretty substantial part of this plan is to get the traffic and the circulation to a safer, more usable, friendly park.
Question for you. You keep coming back to safety and a couple other issues, which I think are a little bit, in my mind, undefined, and that is that you haven't built a case for that. You know, and you referenced gravel. Well, what is the safety metric that you're trying to change there? The other thing is I look at this and I struggle with the idea that this doesn't seem to be so much, in my mind, a master plan, or maybe step back and take the word master plan out and say vision, because it's not, we're not at the level as the administrator suggested. We're not really talking about detailed plans that imply construction. You know, this is a vision. But it seems to be a vision, if you will, that has a whole bunch of little individual ideas that have been grouped together in some fashion just to try and come together with something that we can call a master plan that I don't know that have been, in my mind, have been well thought out as far as the idea of a 20 or 30 or 50-year plan.
Well, I can tell you this plan has been very thought out over this last year and had a lot of input from community members, from the Park Commission. Rick can talk about as the chair of the Park Commission, and input and meeting with the fair, us as far as maintenance. I mean, that is a huge thing that we have to look at as far as maintenance and what we can maintain over the long course, because this park takes a lot of time from our staff. So it has been thought out very much so. Whether it's all needed is really, like I said, and like Lance said, up to the county. We could not put in a splash pad. We could not put in playgrounds. We could not put in shelters. That's completely up to the county board. That's your vision of the park. We'll maintain what's there.
Well, I'll just add something that anybody, you know, I think that's reviewed this plan can tell a lot of work was put into this. We had updates throughout these past, I think, 6 months or so, plus longer, as far as the work that's put in there. So please don't, please don't take it away that there wasn't a lot of work put into this. A lot of work was put into it, and it's very well done. I think that the key is, though, to what was mentioned just now, is this the vision that we want for the park? That's really what I think it boils down to Supervisor Stravinsky's point. As far as the engagement with the community groups, and viewing these documents, how have organizations like UW and the Fair Board reacted when presented with this?
Well, when we had our original concept design where it had the midway in this 23, the Fair Board did not react very well to that. And we had a really candid 2-hour, so we had met with them early on a number of times with Keith and with Jody from the Fair Board, in developing the concept plans. And then when we got to one, we went back to the Fair Board, like I said, a few weeks ago, and had over 2-hour-long conversation, really hashing out what they need, what they see, what issues they see, what concerns they have, where what vendors would be, the linkage between the grandstand and the animal barns, where we would, when we design all of this, if it gets to changes, we have to make sure we put in electric and water where we need it for food trucks and for all of their vendors and stuff right now that we currently have. So we sent this updated plan to them with the midway going the north-south with the pickleballs being moved. I have not heard back from Keith on that, so or the Fair Board. once we made those changes, but all the changes that are on here are based on the conversation we had with them towards that last plan.
And what about UW?
UW Extension, or Marathon County?
Marathon County.
They've been part of this process from the beginning. Ann Herter Rapp was our representative on our committee from the very beginning. So she has been included in all of this, has given updates to her administration. Their major concern with this plan that they really wanted to come out of this was what was the recommendation for the dorms, and then what recommendation there would be for this lot across Stewart. As far as the infrastructure for the campus, this plan didn't really get too much into that because the campus already had their own plan of what some of the updates they wanted to do. But they've been at the table from the beginning.
Yep, they've seen, so UW has seen this as well. Okay. Oh, Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things that, we have to all step back is, there's been discussions about, with the infrastructure committee about, eventually someday moving the highway department, and this is, again, the 20,000 foot level concept of what this park potentially could look like and some of the future uses and some of the future challenges that are sitting there, such as the dorm, UW dorm, the parking lot on the north side of Stewart Avenue. And so, like I said, again, this is a concept. All of the user groups have been, have had discussions. You've had multiple discussions with the Fair Board. You've had people on the committee that represent UW. So this is ultimately, in the long run, a decided compromise on what a plan would look like, understanding that everything is contingent on something else. In other words, we couldn't obviously move and move forward with putting the ice arena where it's conceptually put in today until we had either the highway department moved and a highway department developed someplace else, or if we get to the point where there's a failure and the actual have to closing of the non-use of the current facilities, then we are in an emergency situation. Do we move to an alternate spot because the highway department hasn't moved? Well, then that means that this plan gets altered. Again, this is just conceptual at the 20,000 foot level. That's what I see it as.
Thank you for that clarity. This is because we do have a number of agenda items to get to this evening. These are my thoughts. Assuming that this isn't time sensitive, I would like three things. I would like somewhere in here for it to specify that this is a non-binding plan. It is a plan that was provided by engaging with community members, including community groups and members of the public. Two, I would like to see engagement with the community groups. And when I say engagement with the community groups, I mean signing off on this last piece here, this last plan, because if the Fair Board was not okay with that midway, but then this was reproposed that midway adjusted, I would like to see some sort of approval, some sort of letter of support from them, in addition to the UW as well, and I would like that as part of the plan. Maybe it was only two things. Maybe the third thing was making sure that it wasn't time sensitive. So I guess maybe that would be my third question then. Is this time sensitive that this has to be approved?
It's on my work plan, so I guess it's up to the administrator.
The short answer, no. Of course, the issue with all of this is, again, I don't mean to rehash what I said before, but we need direction as to what to do, because Jamie's point is absolutely right. When we have maintenance come up, your vision as to what that park should provide informs how we proceed with maintenance. When we're looking at the ice sheet and we're starting to think, okay, where are we with, moving this thing along? Do we need to begin coming up with what those future plans might look like in terms of relocation? If you're saying we're getting out of the ice sheet business, when that stops working, that gives us very clear direction as to what information to pass on to the user groups.
Go ahead.
But to your point about engagement with the, in terms of time sensitivity, we can, maybe the next step for us is to make an educational presentation to the full board, Mr. Chair, on the plan as to what the process was for getting the input, engaging the community and engaging those user groups, and asking if there are any questions or concerns about what needs to be done to get the full county board comfortable with approving that plan. And we can do that relatively quickly, and if the county board provides direction, hey, this is a go, no-go issue, that perhaps can inform this. Because to Jamie's point, a lot of work has been done, but I totally appreciate that at the end of the day, the county board sets the vision as to what services we provide and at what level we provide them. I mean, you have the opportunity, you can have a very grand vision, or you can have a less grand vision. There is not a right or a wrong. There's a decision that the county board needs to make in terms of, those are policy decisions. But the short answer, absolutely not. Jamie's work plan isn't determinative of when the county board approves or considers anything.
Well, no, and I'm not as, I guess one of the points then to build on is that I think and I think we can all agree that there's a difference between maintaining what we have that's on the map in front of us and building a new horse barn. I mean, there's a multiple items in the back part of the plan where it talks about, new or, existing, those different classifications with the 30 some odd different items that there are on the list here. So that might be the part that's, you're looking out 10 to 20 years in the future. And obviously the county wants to maintain what it already has, but doing something new and doing a grand vision like this, that's where, if we were to approve a plan like this, we would have to trust that the community groups were engaged and that the members of the public were engaged as well, which it sounds like are already done. But at the end of the day, I still think at least the Fair Board needs to be engaged with that new design. Supervisor Overbeck?
Thank you. One of the questions I would have is we're doing a West Side master plan for this, and often master plans end up being built as you develop them, and they tend to stick. But one of the questions I have is, what should Marathon Park be in 20 years? And I think we're adding a lot of things additional to that site and beyond the site across the railroad tracks. And it's really, what can it accommodate in the next 20, 30 years? And I've been on different event committees and whatever, and we always have to look at what the attendance is going to be. What are the new features and what are they going to draw? Now I see a grandstand in the middle of a green space, away from all parking. So
Grandstand's currently there. That's not being moved.
what's that?
The grandstand's currently in the park. It's not being moved. There's no
Right,
changes.
it's right in the middle, but we've taken away all the parking adjacent to it. We've taken the midway, where is that going to be? There's a lot of green space now shown. There's roundabouts that take up a lot of space. They have trees in the middle of them. Is that safe? I'd like to hear from the traffic concerns as far as what some of those details are, because now we've approved redoing the water service based on the roads and into the campgrounds. And this master plan, I'm guessing, will come into play as those are redone so that that can go ahead next year.
The road or the water service doesn't really affect the plan much of where the water is located. And if we replace it where it currently is, we'll be able to accommodate all of this as well. So,
The other thing I was just going to add quickly is that 23 is still parking. So you're still going to have parking near that grandstand, even with this plan.
Well,
and you have
the small
updated parking on P3 over to the.
But I mean, the overall site as far as, this has probably been looked at and need to go through that further, but as looking at that, there seems to be a lot of decisions that have been made, especially with the routing of the road. With that, roundabouts are meant to create through traffic, so there's not the advantage of stopping traffic or slowing traffic through those. They do slow, but it's a continuous stream of traffic out of that park. So is that the right thing to do in those locations and take up valuable space? Questions like that are some that I would have for the master plan.
Well, and that's something we'll have our consultant here when we do the presentation to the county board, because they do have those engineers and those specialty members on staff that took into account all of that. So I can't speak to all of that, but they can. That's what we hired them for.
The only concern I have is that I feel like some of those questions are going to get answered with, well, we'll answer those questions when you get 10 years from now in order to do the actual projects, versus when you're in the planning phase right now. This is the vision. This isn't the project itself, even though there are a number of potential projects that are included on that map.
I'd have to say I let them answer that when you asked them on the county board, but I would disagree with that, in that we hired a consulting firm with the expertise to design a plan that would be able to be built and workable at that moment, and that's what they took into account with their profession. So.
Jake, if I might.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, sure.
Sure. The only other thing I would just, enlighten the committee about, I mean, as the administrator said, it guides what maintenance that we do. If this isn't the plan that this board sees as the future of that park, then what is that plan? And the question then becomes, because that drives ultimately capital needs as those arise. For example, one of the major things is that you've got a ice arena that is utilized by multiple high schools, maybe a semi-pro team, and also other user groups. And it's it was used when we got it in 1974. And so it is literally almost 50 years old. And we're holding it together with, as I would call, Band-Aids and bubble gum in some cases. And it may, in fact, fail. And if this is not the vision, that's fine. I'm just saying that this is one of the things that are going to come up at some point. That facility is going to get to a point where we're either going to have to stick a significant amount of dollars in to maintain it, or we're going to look at moving it. And so that's what we're trying to determine. We don't want to look foolish at the same token and say, oh, we're going to put in $5 million in renovation and repair in the current facility, and then 3 years later say, oh no, we want to change direction and put up a new facility because we have a different vision. That's what this is trying to avoid, is to have a grander vision long term, if that's what the board deems is appropriate.
I think Chairman Gibbs just addressed what I was going to say.
So next step would be to do a presentation to county board.
I would like this to come back to ERC prior to then for our approval. If that's okay with the county board chair.
So you want it back here before?
I want it back here next month with our approval before it goes to the county board floor.
What would there be a benefit to having the full presentation with the consultants to the full board at the same time? Rather than having the consultants come here twice to provide an education to ERC?
Well, and I wasn't suggesting that MSA come to speak to us, but how about this? Maybe I can make everybody happy. Stand back. Are you confident that you can reach out to the Fair Board and get their approval with that? Okay. And like I said, any other pieces of support, even if it's primary documents from the engagement process, I think would also be beneficial. Information from UW, the parking stuff concerns me. I think that needs to be a part of the decision-making process as well. So how about this? We can forward it to the county board for its consideration. Does that require a recommendation? Because I don't know if this group is at a point where it's comfortable recommending it either.
It's not time sensitive. I mean, there's nothing that says that we can't move it to January also instead of December.
Because that's my concern, is that if you send it to the county board, well, then I think there'd be a recommendation from us to take it up, but I think there's still a little bit of information that we want. Sure, Leonard.
I think, Mr. Chair, you raise a good point with having it certainly coming from a standing committee with a strong recommendation, in my experience, on any issue is good. I think there's also been a lot of good conversation at this committee. I think you may get good conversation at the county board as well that might be items in addition to those that have been raised. So perhaps, to steal your language, maybe this will make everybody happy. If we go to the full board with just an educational presentation to address a lot of the things that were brought up here today in terms of process and considerations with the consultant, and then encourage board members, if they do have additional questions or concerns that they want to be addressed, that they forward them to you, Mr. Langenhan, Chair Langenhan of the committee, to make sure that the committee then, before it forms its final recommendation relative to the plan, considers. So then that when we get back to the full board for its ultimate consideration, you as the chair can address each of those concerns in the presentation to the full board. Would that process make sense for everyone?
That process makes sense to me, but I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee as well. And that's not necessarily the most uncommon thing, because we have had situations where as a committee, we're briefed on items that get brought up 2 to 3 months in advance. So this would be essentially the same thing for the full board. It's very parallel. So are we okay with that if there's an educational presentation to the full county board on this plan? Everybody, including all 30 members of the county board, can raise their concerns, ask their questions then. It would come back to ERC next month. Everybody would have an opportunity to ask their questions, do the research that's necessary, and ERC would act on it. Depending on the action, it goes to county board. Are we okay with that plan? Supervisor Drabeck.
Thank you, sir. I was just wondering, we only have one county board meeting this month, right? Are you going to put all this in that meeting?
Look at what else is going to be on that.
All right, thank you.
I'm not planning on a 5-hour meeting, let's put it that way.
Had enough of those?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I look at this and I think we sort of have a dichotomy here. First of all, and by the way, I'd like to compliment staff. I think a tremendous amount of work has been done. You know, it's incredibly easy to start asking questions and individually poking holes or finding questions or areas of concern. It's much more difficult to start with a clean sheet and say what should be. So this is a great excuse me. This is a great starting point. Don't take the kind of the questions as a negative. I think the way we get to a very, very positive place is by getting everybody that we can possibly involved. And there is, on the one hand, there is really nothing urgent about this. Okay, we don't need a master plan for most of the park area this year. If we approve a master plan within 6 months, long-term, 10, 20 years from now, that's not going to make a particle of difference. The one area that has some urgency for us, though, is the ice arena, the ice building, because that's the facility that could catastrophically fail just because it's 50 years old. So we might want to think about how we separate the two aspects, because one has perhaps some urgency, but we don't know it, and we won't know it until we get a phone call that says, okay, compressors failed, we're done. versus the rest of the park where I think that there's no artificial need for a sense of urgency.
The only thing I'll add to that, and I think Supervisor Stravinsky raised up a good point, because I think what essentially staff is asking for is the plan of maintenance for this park, and that includes that piece with the ice arena. So I think it does create a little bit of urgency, but I see where you're coming from. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I don't know how we reconcile those two slightly divergent needs.
And I think that's one point that is touched on in the report where it talks about the features. So this is on page 111. It'd be page 13 in the plan, but page 111 of the packet. So could you go there, Jamie?
Page 11?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
That's what I
yeah,
was taking notes.
right there.
Right here?
Oh, yep. So this is where it starts. So there's like 30. It's the number of the features in the map.
Yeah.
It's like 38. 38 little summaries of all those different features in the park. And if you notice next to them, each of them have maintain, I think some of them say new, maintain, enhance, new use, new modified. I think the plan does that. So I think, and that's why I think, I think Supervisor Stravinsky said it well, that the questions and everything, yeah, this is a good plan. So this touches on exactly that. I think it's, part of the thing is that I'm just uncomfortable with, if you're saying that 30 years in the future, what's new, because, I don't know where I'm gonna be in 30 years. I don't know what the financial situation of the county is gonna look like in 30 years. So I think that's where I think that level of uncomfortableness comes from, because there's a lot of unknown there. But as far as a workable document, I understand that staff needs this because you need to know what to maintain with the facilities. But as far as what's in front of us today, I would support having that full educational presentation of the county board. It would come back to us. We would make the recommendation after we have that information, and it would go to the county board after that. Does everybody else feel comfortable with that? I will say, if you do have questions, you do have concerns, if you're reviewing this and you want to bring something up, either bring it up at that county board meeting where this is going to get placed on there, or contact staff and they'll be able to provide you an answer as well. Okay. Is there anything else you had, Jamie? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
One question, just relative to the timing issue. Is there any urgent need that we would need to have that presentation done in December versus January?
All right, moving on to item C6, amended 2022 capital project request, Phase A closure project and funding sources. I believe we have Melissa and Dave with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, for those who don't know, Dave Hagenbusher, manager with the Solid Waste Department. And yes, I've been the one that's been obnoxiously kicking the table panel back here, so sorry about that. In your packet, you should have received the resolution for, yes, the 2022, which was this year, amendment for the CIP. So earlier this year, to ensure that we had disposal capacity for our community, we went along and did a 6.5 acre construction of Subtitle D landfill liner. About midway through the year, through our construction project, I think it was about July, the Wisconsin DNR approached us and said that you will not receive approval on this expansion unless you do a cap, 10-acre closure cap on our existing landfill. This sort of came as a surprise to us. We thought that we had more flexibility in that scheduling, but it was a condition of the approval. And therefore, over the last few months, we've scrambled to make sure that we get that cap completed to ensure that we continue to have disposal capacity for our residents. So you'll see that total cost of that cap was around $1.5 million. and we have 3 funding sources where that money will be coming from. This has already gone to the Solid Waste Management Board earlier this month. Just to give a brief summary of those funding sources, $657,000 would be coming from the Environmental Repair Fund. For those who might not be aware, that was a fund that was established 1993 through 99. It was a surcharge that was assessed, and that money went into essentially a fund that was it was established because of essentially because of the Holtz-Kralje site and what happened there as it became a Superfund site. So it was a pot of money that would go to Marathon County municipalities that might have to do a forced closure. So that is one of the criterias to use the $657,000 is it must be a state forced closure, therefore allowing us to utilize that funding. The next source is an overfund of our department's pollution liability fund, which is another $556,000. So essentially just bringing that down to where it needs to be. And the last one is an advance from Marathon County contingency funds totaling $288,000. Back in 2013, following Chapter 289.41 for owner financial responsibility for solid waste facilities, we worked with our finance director to either put money into escrow accounts for closure or move along the lines of a letter of credit. Finance director Christy Palmer made this recommendation that we would use this funding and then repay that on an 18-month payback schedule. So this work actually is just about to be completed for 2022, and we will be wrapping up this construction project within the next month. So any questions?
Yeah, this one in front of solid waste.
Yes, this is solid waste.
Approved unanimously, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for staff? I believe then next steps would be to approve the agreement or recommend approval to the county board then?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Supervisor Shafinsky?
I'd like to recommend that we approve and move it to the county board.
Okay. Motion has been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Shafinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Corporation Counsel Pernier, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Did you have more information for the agenda item from before 5B2?
I do. So just based on my review of the applicable statute, so really the question was the difference between those first 3 or those zoning changes in the first section and in the second section. The first 3 that we approved, those were zoning changes that are in towns that are governed by county zoning. So they're actually changes to or amendments to the county zoning ordinances. Whereas the second section, the second 2 that the committee is taking action on, those are in towns that have not adopted county zoning or towns that have elected to adopt their own zoning ordinance as a village power under 60.62. So the big difference is for the first 3, the county is required to hold a public hearing and go through the process that it does. On the second set, the county is actually not required to do a public hearing, and the reason is the town has already done that. The town is actually required to go through that. But because we are a county that has a zoning ordinance, the town is still required to get county board approval to any changes, even if the town has elected to adopt its own zoning ordinance. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. The reason why I think where some of the confusion came from was that maybe it's something from years and years ago with land conservation and zoning, which would have been in the first couple terms I was on the board. maybe we listed all of those together at one point, but I thought that when we were reviewing these in the past, you would have some that would have county zoning and some that wouldn't have county zoning, and they'd be among the same list. So maybe it was me thinking back years and years ago that we just kept them in the same list, and then now we're differentiating them between those that have their own zoning and those that have county zoning. So if that is the case, I apologize to the group, because I think that's where our discussion began, which was that the ones that we looked at for 1 through 3 have county zoning, and the ones that have town zoning would be, well, it was the town of Mountain and the town of Wausau. So basically what I'm trying to say is I think I confused you all, and I apologize. But thank you for the clarification, Corporation Council. So the town of Wausau and the town of Rib Mountain have their own town, have their own town zoning. They're still bringing this to us for our approval.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. So we're back to, we're gonna try and go back here and finish this portion off. So we're on 5B2 to what Corporation Council commented on. Now we have that clarification. Seeing as how the town approved this, it would, in my opinion, it would be appropriate that we also approve it. So what is the pleasure of the committee? Supervisor Shafinsky?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we approve the Town of Wausau Commercial Light Manufacturing District to Agricultural Transition District report and zoning changes as they have already approved, and that we move it to the county board for their approval.
Okay. Motion has been made. Is there a second? Second by Rodney Oskoff. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you again, Corporation Council. All right, moving on to D, sorry, for 5D, review and possible action, we have none. 6, educational
Wait.
presentations.
Did you miss C7?
I might have. I did. C7, negotiate agreement with the town of Ringgold for siting of phases 6 through 8 of Bluebird Ridge. I apologize. Back to the solid waste staff.
That's all right, Mr. Chair. This agenda item will actually be pulled until the January meeting. There was just a couple of, we were finalizing some of the language, everything. The terms of the agreement aren't changing. We just wanted to finalize some language in it, so January, we'll bring it back.
Okay.
And then,
Thank you.
I don't know if this is out of order, but I believe this is Melissa Johnson's last ERC meeting.
Oh.
So,
Yes.
before she retires, so I thought we should take a minute to thank her for her service to Marathon County, because I don't know if she'll be staying for the whole meeting.
Well, yeah, on behalf of the staff and members of the committee, and I hope Solid Waste thanked you as well at their committee meeting.
I have one more with them.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
I
well,
have out at the site, so.
okay. But yeah, we certainly appreciate all the years that you've given to Marathon County, and I hope you enjoy the next steps in your life.
I appreciate that, thank you. And I said this at the Solid Waste Board. I have enjoyed working for a mission-driven, values-oriented organization to work to make Marathon County the healthiest, safest, most prosperous. It has been my pleasure, and I have so loved working with everybody in this county. It's been a joy.
Thank you. Okay.
So how many years?
Just under 15 here. Yeah.
Well, thank you for.
All right. 5D, review and possible action, we had none. Item 6, educational presentations, outcome monitoring reports, and committee discussion. A, department updates. Conservation Planning and Zoning, Park Rec and Forestry, Solid Waste. We have 6A1, 2023 zoning amendment changes for Chapter 17 and Chapter 22. Now I think we get to Shad.
So I just wanted to kind of give a brief update on where we're at with the zoning changes. Currently, right now, I just wanted to let the committee know. So we decided to hold off a bit on the Chapter 22 zoning code updates. And the reason for that is we had a meeting with DNR to get some clarity on what we were changing. And we were informed that
the end of December, they are redoing their model ordinance, which is predominantly what ours is based off of. So it doesn't really make sense to move forward with any changes now until that model ordinance comes out, since it'll be coming out so recently. And then once that is out, we can bring that back in front of you guys. I just wanted to again touch base on kind of our timeline. So in December, we're planning on doing a second round of outreach to our towns. We haven't had too much input yet from our towns regarding some of the zoning changes that we're kind of bringing forth, or we haven't really had too much input on if towns want us to look at something. But we will bring that forward once we do eventually hear from our towns. January, in January, we'd like to have a draft for you guys to review, so you have some text to view and get your input on it as well. And then we'd present it to you, get your input, and then the following February meeting is where we'd kind of take your recommendations as well, make changes, let you review them again. And then our goal again is either February or March to have something adopted before the busy season of next year. So it's just very brief. I don't know if you guys have any questions or anything like that. Predominantly, what'll happen next is, again, we'll do the second outreach to the towns, make sure we're getting everybody's input, and then next month meeting we'll have a draft language for you guys to kind of review and get your input as well.
Okay, any questions for Shad? Have you had you had open houses planned for this too, correct?
We do have open houses. I believe that one would be after the January. That was on the schedule for after the January input from you guys.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you. We have 7, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determinations. 7A, review feedback from the Executive Committee on Strategic Plan updates. All right. I should have had this pulled up already. I apologize. I'll try and summarize it while I pull up the strat plan information.
I did pull up the document.
Oh, thank you. So the reason why I wanted to bring this back, because I am a firm believer that before anything comes from this committee to the county board, as your committee chair, I want you all to review it and act on it. Because, well, you are the ones that drive this information, and I want to make sure that you all are aware of anything and that I am not off of my own acting on behalf of the committee without authorization. So that's why this is back. We presented these to the executive committee last month. There was some discussion regarding one of the items, and it is the outcome measure 3 for objective 5.2. So by December 31st, 2024, an average of 320 acres of land per year will be acquired for the Marathon County Parks and Forestry System. So a question was asked, and it was a question of whether or not something were to be revised as far as that 320 acres number. We already discussed this item pretty in-depthly at a past meeting where we talked about the county's role in acquiring land for those systems. And essentially the question, at least my understanding of the question was that 320 acres, what is that based on? Has the county met that goal? What is the purpose of that number? And because of that, and if there was an opportunity for the committee to revise that number, it is why it is back in front of you today. So I think Jamie has some additional information for us to understand where the 320 acres comes from.
Yes. So in talking with Tom, as far as where the original 320 acres came from, we don't have a really clear direction on how that number was chosen. But that number is made up of 2 numbers. It's made up of 200 acres of county forest and 120 acres of parkland combined. So what we've done with that amount over the past 5 years is during that time we've updated our county outdoor recreation plan, which is a 5-year plan that we need to have in adopted so that we can get grant funding, and it's a goal for where the county should be. And we also updated our 15-year county forest comprehensive land use plan and where we use these numbers. So we have not met the 320 acres over the last 5 years because part of our goal in both our outdoor recreation plan and our county forest comprehensive land use plan is not to be pursuing land to buy, but we talk with willing landowners. So landowners that come to us that have land they want to sell to the county, then we pursue that further, and Tom has mainly done that for our department. Tom does have a printout that he gave me, and I don't have it right now, yes, thank you, of what we've acquired. So for parkland, we have averaged like 8.62 acres per year. We bought a total of 43 acres in the last 5 years. We haven't had a lot of opportunity to purchase parkland. These were, people coming to us. For the county forest, we've been a little bit closer to that 200 average, with an average of 111.9 acres per year over the last 5 years. So we've acquired just under 560 acres. So it's a goal that's there as far as if land becomes available on how we're going to add. One thing I want to add, though, in our outdoor recreation plan, where it kind of lists more specifically of how this 320 acres works into our plan, is that in our analysis of needs and demands for the county, the county board did a goal of our outdoor recreation plan to provide 250 acres per 1,000 residents in the county. So currently, by our calculations of our current, and this is park and forest land, it's not just parkland, so it's combined open space. Currently, when we did this plan in 2020, we had a deficit of 11 acres. They have a projection in here of the total acreage and a surplus or deficit based on what our county population will be out to 2030. If we do not add an average of 320 acres or whatever we have the ability to add, we will continue to grow that deficit to close to 4,000 acres by 2030 based on the growth of the county. So we use that 320 acres as an average. If we're going to add it, then we're staying in line with what our goal of the county is, to provide that 250 acres per 1,000 residents and to provide that open space. So we have used it since it's been adopted.
Okay. So that's why it's back in front of you all. If not, these were already recommended from the ERC to go to the executive committee this past month. Based on that information, does the committee want to make any changes? Otherwise, I will simply take this back to executive committee. Okay. All right. Thank you. Like I said, I want to make sure that I don't do anything without the committee's approval, so that's why it's here. And, Jamie, go ahead.
Well, Chair Longenhan, if you want, I can send you this page of the outdoor recreation plan, which illustrates that, if you want to share that with the group, if you feel like you need to.
Sure, that's fine. More information is always good. Okay. All right. So no action needed here because there was already the formal action of bringing the strategic plan items to the executive committee already. Moving on to 7B, update on the environmental impact funds. Everybody's favorite topic. All right, B 1 through 3, updated McDevco loan program, 2, potential for funding groundwater plan efforts, and 3, other potential projects. Starting with Lori.
I didn't know this was your favorite topic.
Yeah. I've been here too long.
So we're doing the alphabet soup of environmental funds today. So we're going to talk about the environmental impact funds now. I believe at the last meeting, the ask was to give you an update on what is in the environmental impact funds and a bit of a status on the McDevco loan program. With the premise being that you might want to consider environmental impact funds for the groundwater plan. So I did put together a few slides to give some background on the environmental impact funds because I know some supervisors may not be familiar with that, and I know there are people in this room who probably have more context they can add to the background here too. So I'll go through those few slides and then let anyone else add context in terms of the background of this fund, and then we'll talk about the loan program and some other potential things that could be funded with the EIF funds. Nope, I don't want that. Hang on. Oh, no. Oh, I might not see it. Okay, we'll go like this. All right, so the Environmental Impact Fund was created in 2006, or given to us in 2006, when Marathon County and the American Transmission Company entered into an agreement for construction of the Arrowhead Western Transmission Line. The idea was to give payments to the county for the depreciated value of county land from the high voltage transmission line. It's my understanding that it was an initial payment of about $1.6 million, and then an annual payment of somewhere around $62,000 a year was paid to the county in those funds. In state statute, there is actually guidance for these types of fees that are paid to municipalities that states that they should be used for environmental programs. And then the county, in turn, when they got these funds, followed with and reiterated guidance that the funds should go towards environmental and natural resource protection projects and projects that were consistent with the county comprehensive and strategic plans as well. So from 2006 to 2018, it looks like the county funded about 30 projects through the EIF fund. And then in 2018, the decision was made by the county board to approve a resolution to create a new revolving loan fund for the failing private on-site wastewater treatment systems, POUTS. So at that time, the resolution awarded the estimated remaining EIF balance of $650,000. That $650,000 was estimated at the time. A couple things that went into that estimate was we still had 6 other awarded projects that were underway. So they were accounting for funds that might still need to go to projects that were open and on the books that have since been completed. And then also that we are continuing to receive some annual payments and interest on that fund balance. So when we checked into it this fall, the approximate balance today actually sits at $1.2 million, not $650,000. And I will pause there to take questions on the EIF or let anyone else add additional context before I talk about the McDevco loan program.
Yes, I'll provide just a little bit of background here, but as far as the distribution of those funds and the way that worked is that there would be a certain amount of funds that are available in a certain year. We would collect applications from various organizations for certain projects that would have a environmental impact, and then funds would be awarded. Sometimes I think we would have a certain amount that we set aside in a year that was enough to cover all the projects, and then over time as the money went down, we would only cover certain percentages. In my earliest days on the board, and maybe Supervisor Drabeck and Seefeld might remember this, but we actually had such a competitive process that they would come in, they would present their applications, and we had clickers that we used to rank certain aspects of the project as they were going through their and presenting their information, then we would rank them. So then as it got down to less and less funds, we sort of had this need come up with POUTS, and we had some money left over, and we said, well, rather than using the funds to fund a few remaining projects, we decided to put it aside into the this revolving loan fund program. So most of you are familiar about that before, but that's what it was like when the funds were available and we were distributing the funds every year for these different community projects that would come up. So go ahead, Lori.
Did you want to add something, Administrator Leonard?
Just that the House was to replace what we anticipated the Wisconsin fund to.
I'm going to get to that. Yeah, okay. So, any other questions just in general on the EIF before I talk about the POUTS loan program? Okay. All right. So in 2018, the county board did approve that resolution for the loan program, and an agreement was signed with McDevco in 2019 to attempt to launch this program. And I titled this slide Barriers because it has had barriers, limitations to making it work correctly. And I wanted to go through those before I get to where we're working with on McDevco on a new loan program. I think the primary barrier was that immediately the loan program was set set up to mimic a grant program. And therefore, like everything kind of followed the Wisconsin Fund because the idea was that the Wisconsin Fund was going to go away. Well, the Wisconsin Fund didn't go away, so at that time. So if you have a grant with the same parameters as a loan, then people who qualified for the grant money usually went for the grant money as opposed to going for a loan because it was free money versus having to pay it back. So the Wisconsin Fund has officially sunsetted as of now. There's no, we have heard no talk of bringing that back. So it took its last applications this last February. The other thing, though, with the loan program is the income threshold, regardless, was so low that very few people could qualify. So when we talked to people who showed interest in the loan program, they told us usually that they were just above that 45,000 mark, and so they weren't qualifying for the loan. And so they didn't continue with an inquiry or try and get the loan beyond getting that failure verification or talking to McDevco once because they knew their income was too high. The other thing, in talking to McDevco and talking to borrowers who were interested in getting a POUTS loan, they weren't able to borrow 100% of what they needed to repair the failing POUTS. So they were capped at 60% based on how the original loan program was set up. And in most cases, we did hear even if they could qualify, they needed to be able to borrow the whole amount, not 60% in order to fix their POUTS because they didn't have enough money to even fund that other 40%. They wanted to be able to borrow 100%. And then during the pandemic, enforcement on failing POUTS was greatly reduced. So we believe that residents didn't feel the same sense of urgency or pressure to fix failing POUTS because we had different objectives and things during the pandemic, and we weren't enforcing on the failing systems as much. So we weren't putting the pressure there. So, oops, slide got repeated. But the interest in the loan program is there for sure. We have received dozens and dozens of inquiries. We've issued 30-plus verification letters in the last few years. So as part of the program, they would have to get a letter issued from our department that says they have a failing POUTS to even start that conversation with McDevco. So we have issued several 30-plus verification letters. And in 2022, we've sent almost 200 failure notification letters, either for holding tank integrity or surface discharge. So that interest is now really growing. We actually have a running list of people who are interested in the new McDevco loan program once it's ready to go in 2023. So. And then I think at the last meeting you had asked, like, what do we actually think the interest is again in terms of who would actually apply for this? So I also just looked up how many Wisconsin Fund grants we've helped residents in Marathon County get in the last 5 years, and that has been 38 since 2019. So we definitely anticipate there is interest for the loans out there. It's just that we need to make these fixes with McDevco to make the loan program work correctly. So we have been working with McDevco on a new agreement for this loan program to relaunch in 2023. On a high level, things that we're changing in the program include expanding the income thresholds to allow for more than just the extremely low income residents to qualify. So very low and low income residents would also qualify to apply for a loan. We will make it so that they can borrow up to 100% if they need to do that. And we will waive the application fees for extremely low and very low income levels to remove that barrier to them applying for the loan. And even with the low income level applicants, they could roll that application fee into their loan to pay back if they wanted to. And we've also been working on a variable payment plan idea. So based on a person's income level, they could structure their payment plan for the loan on what they could afford based on their income level. Now the question is, what if the Wisconsin Fund comes back? We know there is a surplus out there that the state is dealing with. Again, we have not heard any discussion of bringing the Wisconsin Fund back, but from our point of view, if the Wisconsin Fund were to come back, it would still be something that we would just try and couple with the loan program. So we would encourage people who qualify for both to get the grant money they can get and then bridge any remaining gap with the loan program, so. Okay, I'll pause there for questions on the McDevco loan program.
So you have a nice 10,000-foot overview. What are the actual figures that are applied?
Actual figures of,
Well, you're talking about changing the amount levels and the ceiling levels, but there are no dollar values in your slides. So
in terms of who, like the income levels or?
income levels, and I guess the other thing that I'll express a little bit of concern about is that depending on who and what, and I get that, everything's a little bit variable, but I'm always concerned when we don't have somebody who has no money into the game, so to speak. 100% coverage just concerns me that we're dealing with somebody who can't even find 5 or 10 or 15% or 20% to put into their project. That tends to concern me.
So on the income levels, we're going to use the HUD income levels for median household income. So there are 3 different categories within that would qualify in this program. It is extremely low, very low, and low. I don't remember the exact dollar figures, but $88,000 is the median income in Marathon County, thereabouts. And I know very low sits at 50% of that, and I believe low is about 80%. So it goes up to somewhere, I can't do the math that fast, but 54,000 is, okay, there we go, Kurt. Thank you. So, and that depends on it would be a scale depending on their family size too. So those, that's a 1-person income versus a family income. So that's what we would use. That's the best guidance that we think is available and matches other grant and loan programs that we've looked around at to see what would be good for eligible limits. Your second question was, remind me what the second question was, sorry. Oh, yes. So we did talk with McDevco about the idea of down payments. And I did say it's up to 100% because they are going to have to assess risk with every applicant. And so there could be, in some cases, that there would be a requirement of a down payment. So that's definitely something that can be kept on the table.
I was going to add one more thing to that, which is chances are if you ever hope to sell your property in the future, that's also going to be a consideration for whatever property owner is thinking about buying that property. So it also has the ability to protect the consumer as well, that they have skin in the game because they might want to sell that property in the future. Well, most people are going to at some point. Sorry, Chair Gibbs.
I was just going to mention that obviously we're going to be taking a lien on the property, and depending on our position, obviously, if they ever dispose of the property, that lien is going to have to be cured one way or the other.
You want to add something? No. Okay, that's great.
Supervisor Rayback and then Supervisor Ray.
Thank you. Is there interest rate on this then? I didn't see that on there.
Yes, and
what
that
would
will be determined by the county, and we're still in discussions about what that would be. So I think we've talked about something around 3%, but but I think basically McDevco has recommended that the county determine that rate, so.
All right, but basically it was set up originally that they didn't have to pay it off until the land changed hands. Is that still going to be there or not?
No. So I guess our thought process on that is in order to stay true to the intent of the money, that we do need people to start paying some of it back so that we can continue to have a loan program to offer more citizens of Marathon County. But the payment structure is going to be set up so it wouldn't, so based on their income level, they can have a variable payment structure so it won't break their wallet, essentially. So.
If I could have just add one thing, I think, Lori did a nice job talking about, bringing up the intent. Looking back to how this program was originally intended, it's to address a need, a public good, right? What the program has put in place to provide a financing mechanism for a large purchase that some of the individuals that have this need to have this work done, simply put, can't afford. So to Lori's point, we can't structure a program that has an interest rate that is, equal to or higher than a bank, because otherwise people, if they already had access to bank financing or personal financing, they would arguably do that. And also to make sure that people get the system fixed, because the alternative is they continue to utilize a failed or failing system and polluting the groundwater. And I think we've all seen in the news, and we've had it here in Marathon County, where when those systems fail, they do pollute surface and groundwater. So we're working to figure out the details, to Supervisor Sherfinsky's point, but one of our guiding principles is that we want to deploy the funds. They're not doing any good to address the need to address groundwater and surface water contamination if they're not deployed. And at the same time, the desired effect of the county board to make sure that we don't just release all these funds without making sure that there's some mechanism for recapture. So certainly the securitization that Chair Gibbs brought up and the payment plan piece that Lori brought up, those are considerations, but it's going to be a process. It has been a process with McDevco where we're trying to do our best to kind of balance those competing interests. There's certainly going to be, the people that we're trying to help with this program are people that if you were a bank, you probably wouldn't loan money to. Because I'm sure if a number of you in this room had a failing septic system, you would have some mechanism to procure the funds, whether you have the cash on hand or you have the ability to secure financing to pay for that $12,000 to $20,000 system. The people we're talking about do not. And the Wisconsin Fund no longer exists. So it's, for specific thresholds and everything right now, we're kind of building that. But those are the things we're trying to balance as we do that.
Supervisor Rivera, then Chair Gibbs.
Yeah, just for this committee, hopefully I can put some people at a little ease. The executive director of McDevco had asked me to be on her new subcommittee for loan funding. So this will be a big part of that. So this committee will have a direct connection to the committee that is going through this loan funding process.
Good to know. Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, remind, it sounds like a big dollar figure, 1.2 million, but when you start to calculate it out, at $20,000 per system, or if that were the average cost of a complete, renovation of a system, you're only talking about 60 properties that you're going to be able to utilize, and the $1.2 million is gone. So it's critical to part of this is the repayment, so that if we have 30 applicants this year and we start receiving some payments back, we may be able to, have more than 60 individuals and serve the betterment of the county for improving the environment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few years back, I brought in from the community grant block program.
Mm-hmm.
Does that still exist to our knowledge?
It does. I can speak to, there's two other, I cannot speak in depth to the community block grant program. There is a USDA home repair loan program as well. With that, there is an option for a grant for people who are 62 and older, and they have to be below $42,000 a year, I believe, in income, and they can't own any other land as well. So if they're farmers, they can't actually qualify for that. If they don't, they could still potentially qualify for a loan program up to, I believe it's up to $40,000, but there is a fixed payment, and actually when you start to look at the fixed payment, it gets pretty high. There's nothing, so I think these are all complementary programs. I think they're all part of the solution. If they don't fit, if they're a good fit for USDA, if they're 62 or older and they meet all the qualifications for that grant, we're going to encourage them to go for the grant for sure. And depending on where they fall, I think we would channel them to the appropriate funding method. I think it's fair to say there's not enough funding out there, and the more we have, the better. So.
Thank you.
So to change topics a little bit, the original question did come up as to how much was sitting in the balance because of the question of funding for the groundwater plan. And so I did, I think as we were talking internally about considerations for the EIF balance, we definitely believe the 650 that was initially put aside in the resolution needs to remain with that POUTS loan program for the time being. We need the opportunity to make that loan program work. We believe we've identified several factors that have contributed to why it didn't work correctly. So we need that chance to make it work correctly, and it was awarded by the county board in 2018. So we'd like that opportunity to take that project and finish it, so to speak, or get it really going. The question did come up as to if there's any EIF funds that could be used for the groundwater plan. We believe that is, in fact, there could be some money available depending on how the ERC and the county board would look at the EIF balance of 1.2 million. There is a remaining 550,000 that could potentially be allocated to other environmental needs, including that groundwater plan. And then recently, in the last month, we were actually made aware of an urgent situation that is developing at the Big O Plain with the aerators that are on the brink of failure. As you all remember, in 2009, there was this fish kill event at the Big O Plain, and they're seeing the conditions set up again that this could happen very soon again. And one part of addressing that issue is getting the aerators fixed. And so the discussion has been had as to whether or not Marathon County is one of the 4 parties that helps maintain the aerators at the Big O Plain could bring any funds to bear to that effort. And so the EIF has been previously used to help repair the aerators. So we do also see that as a potential use of the EIF funds for the aerators at the Big O Plain.
Thank you, Chairman. Lori, do we have any idea of what we are looking at in terms of dollars for the Big O Plain project?
We think it could be up to, worst case scenario, 150,000 for 2 aerators, but we think it might be more in the 100,000 realm.
Would that be our portion, or is that the total
That
project?
would be the entire portion, and the other partners are actually seeking some funds too, but I don't think there's any indication that they would be able to bring that anywhere near that dollar amount. So, Kirsty, I don't know if you want to add anything from the partners of other funds they're looking into.
Sure. WVIC, the Wisconsin Valley Improvement Company, who's one of the main partners that helps maintain the aerators and does all the water testing throughout the winter, they do not have funding to bring to the table. So from what they've kind of discussed in passing, they've always viewed the majority of their part in the partnership as maintaining, literally boots on the ground operating, things like that. We have been in talks with the Wisconsin DNR as well, and they have even more red tape than what is imaginable to try to seek funds once we get, above a couple of $1,000s for these types of projects. So it could be possible, but they had even said that if all of the stars aligned and they put in the proper request to get funding for this particular project, it'd be about 2 years out that we would get the actual funds. And that's if things moved quickly, so it's very discouraging hearing the type of timelines that they work with, but we're probably not too surprised to hear that at this point as well. So, again, we can't truly predict the future, but in several meetings with WVIC recently, they were just discussing, about half of the dozen factors that they watch extremely closely heading into the winter months, knowing that if all of the factors play out, that they will see another 2009 situation. And out of all the factors that they listed, they said every single box was checked in terms of exactly what happened in 2009 with, they try to aim for about 60% of the reservoir being filled. And lately they've been running at the highest at about 50%, and that's the highest they can get just due to the drought we had this fall. They have very, very, very low base flows, or the CFS, cubic feet per second, that they're measuring. And when that water moves so slowly into there, that really impacts the oxygen levels, as does the ice coverage. And so, they're really looking at this with some concern. And so BEPCO, the Big O Plain Citizens Organization, organization in WVIC. They've been reaching out to our department. They've been reaching out to the EPIC farmer group, doing presentations, trying to make everyone aware that there could be, an impending situation, and seeing what we can do to maybe think creatively or think of out-of-the-box solutions to try to work together and pull funds together to try to avoid the worst-case scenario.
That's the end of the presentation. I think the question again started back at last month as to whether or not EIF could be used for other sources at this point. So I think we would bring that back to ERC and ask for your direction there in terms of what you want to see or do, with the understanding that I think we talked before about the need to really, especially with the groundwater plan and even with these aerators, there's things that probably need to happen sooner rather than later if we want to keep things moving along with the groundwater plan.
So then with the PowerPoint, just to, maybe it's because, like I said earlier, I've been here too long, but it sounds like the answer to the question as far as whether or not it could be used is yes.
I think the resolution allocated $650,000 in 2018. So, and I believe that was based on the assumption that that was the balance, and the balance is more than what was assumed for reasons that we think, it is still accruing interest. So I think that's part of the increase.
Granted that would address fewer systems with the 650 compared to the 1.2.
1.2,
right? Yeah.
I think from our point of view, obviously, we would try and put the entire 1.2 to Pouts as well, but we understand that there are some urgent needs within the county that could also be addressed right now, that it's worth considering whether or not that pot.
To branch out to these other two areas here.
You're asking me to choose my favorite child, Jake.
You're asking the committee to choose the. That being said, if it's $150,000 for the aerator, that would leave, and I'm just assuming that you leave the 650 with Pouts. That would leave $400,000. I should say up to $400,000 that could go towards the groundwater plan.
Correct.
And that's also assuming that we front the entire $150,000 for the aerator, which it sounds like they have some cost constraints as well, according to Kirsty's report. So, have you reached out to McDevco about this as far as the county thinking about reallocating some of these funds into these different areas?
I think McDevco is aware that we estimated the balance at 650,000. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess I can't 100%, but I know we've had previous conversations and the resolution says 650,000, so.
Kirsty, what was your scaled down funding ask for the plan? There were various levels, weren't there?
Do you want me? Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, so I think once we went back and looked at it, for everything, including testing, if we did the full testing that included more than just what our health department can do, it was going to be $300,000. $150,000 of that was for testing. The other $150,000 would be for the workshops and planning efforts associated with the groundwater plan. If we scaled it back to just the testing parameters done by the health department, which is nitrates and E. coli, the testing was $50,000 plus another $100,000 to $150,000 for the planning efforts.
So what I'm hearing is that it sounds like there's enough for those two priorities if you left it at 650, right?
Yes.
Interesting. Supervisor Shervinsky.
Yeah, just running the numbers, if I heard you correctly, it would seem that there would be an extra $100,000 between the two projects if we funded the aerator at 150, if that's what it turned out to be, and if the groundwater testing was in fact 300.
Yes.
That would leave another 100,000 that could either go back to pots, could be held in reserve for another project, perhaps, too.
What is the, thank you. What is the, I mean, with the groundwater plan, with the testing and the work that's done, are there additional ongoing costs that the county would be obligated to beyond what's asked for in the plan? Like is there, how do I say this? Because you can always do testing, right? Like you could do it now, you could do it 5 years from now, whenever. It's just when the committee would determine that to be a priority and come to the county for that ask. I guess, is it worth having that $100,000 as a contingency for these certain items for future costs? I don't know.
I think that's a great idea, that it could be like, I think we mentioned in the last meeting, some counties with their groundwater plans have then established more regular testing or checking in, getting a pulse in terms of where that is. So, if that's something that came out of the groundwater plan, a direction, perhaps there would be a funding source already set aside for that with this. I think, if the POUTS loan program is very successful, then the 100,000 could potentially be moved over to that. I think we need to prove that we can make use of the 650.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and
Yep.
so if we can, then maybe, and if we can use that 650, and then maybe the other 100,000 could then go to the
POUTS, which if people are using the revolving loan fund and they're being successful with it, then I think there's an argument to be made that the $100,000 should go towards supporting that, so we get more systems into compliance.
Yes.
So what is the ask from staff today as far as what would be next steps if we wanted to look into the 650 for that, and the remaining figures would go towards the groundwater plan and the aerator? What is the ask?
I think the ask is that, I think we are asking you to consider taking some of that EIF fund and putting it towards the groundwater plan and the aerators, and not touching the POUTS 650,000.
Yeah. Any other questions for staff? I have to do some thinking in my head. A simple motion, or?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, because this is a very.
We don't have a plan that would be asked to approve.
That's the thing, right? Yeah.
Chair Gibbs, do you have a comment?
Should we,
I think you could do it two ways. You could say, you could make a recommendation for the full board to consider. It would be a budget transfer from the EIF fund up to $150,000 to repair the aerators. Now, it would be a budget transfer. It would require a 2/3 majority, and you would be allocating, a set figure up to for repair. The question that I was just asking the administrator was, how does it fit under our procurement code, and do we have to go out for RFP? And the question, we think we have an answer, but we're not 100% sure on that, is that the DNR owns the equipment, and they have procured, so we're going to go under their procurement. So they have gone out for effectively RFP. So we wouldn't necessarily need to do an RFP to provide the funding under our, but it would be an allocation of up to $150,000 if that's the recommendation of staff, to allocate towards the repair of the aerators on the old plane owned by the DNR. And then you could, if you chose to, allocate any portion of the remaining unallocated $400,000 if you chose to the water plan. But again, it's a funding. So again, it's a budget transfer. It would have to come to the board. There would be a resolution drafted by council, and it would be a 2/3 majority requirement.
So maybe this would be a question for Kirsty or another member of staff. Help me understand our relationship with these aerators then? Because if they're owned by the DNR, why are we responsible for a portion of their upkeep?
We were just having this
Did I just ask a
conversation
great
back here.
question? Yeah.
I'll just caveat this all by saying that the DNR is broken, and I will go on record by saying that they have been extremely underfunded for like 15 years. And so there is almost nothing going on there that really makes a lot of fiscal sense right now. That being said, Jamie was at a meeting with us a couple months ago, and we had multiple DNR people, multiple county parks, multiple CPZ people there, WVIC people there. There's like 20 people in the room. And so I'm just going to summarize this in 2 sentences of what the DNR was saying. If you all can help us get the money for this, that is the only way this is going to happen. So I know it's sad and it's crazy, but they don't have money to do it and they can't get it quickly. And there's no true funding source except for another government body applying for DNR money to purchase the aerators. So the thought was to maybe have someone apply for DNR grants to purchase that equipment. Keep in mind, even though the DNR owns this, I mean, it's at a county park, our biggest and most revenue producing county park. It has a huge environmental impact in the county. So there's a lot of players in the game other than the DNR owning it. WVIC, when they gave a presentation to us at an EPIC meeting a couple weeks ago, they have the true statistics on how many recreationists come to the Big O Plain just for fishing on non-frozen water. And it's so many thousands. Maybe Jamie might even know this number off the top of her head, but shocking amount of people that recreate on that body of water. So even though it seems a little bit weird how we are trying to pursue an out-of-the-box solution to this, to all the players in the game, it really does make a lot of sense how it all comes together. And we do have a copy of the MOU that was on file. Unfortunately, it is a little bit outdated, which is why we were having recent meetings to try to piece together an MOU that currently makes sense. But it's a partnership that's operated like this for many years.
And we have previously given EIF funds to the aerators to replace the motors in 2010. So I believe these aerators are the original from 1980s.
The 80s, yeah.
And the motors needed an update in 2010, but now its useful life is over.
Who maintains these then? Is it the DNR? Like if there's I don't know, a light bulb goes out, I don't know, like who does that work?
WVIC folks, but they're not electrical people either, so they have to kind of hire it out as needed. But they're the ones that keep tabs on how things are working. And then as things start breaking, since they have no money, again, they come back to the partnership and they say, hey guys, we got a problem. And then it's the other partners that help fund the situation. It is baffling, isn't it? I know.
Well,
I'm with you on that.
What's that?
I said, I am with you on this. Yeah.
The only other thing I was going to add, and this is a real fly in the ointment for me, is, well, we had a process for a long time where when funds were available, we had a competitive process to distribute them out to the community. And in this case, we wouldn't have any sort of process. We would just provide the funds and that would be it. So there would be, granted, I mean, the funds would be essentially depleted after doing these projects after that, but there's also precedent behind it too. So just some thoughts, but did you have something to add, Kirsty?
Yeah, I just would, I mean, if we do, the alternative to not fixing them and helping, understand that making these aerators functional is not 100% fail-safe as far as providing protection to the fish in that environment. It's a Band-Aid, but it does assist in providing oxygenated water for that. And one thing that I will maybe reiterate that the last time that we had a fish kill down there in 2009, it was devastating to the area economically. And so I would hate to have to go through that again, not utilizing the resources that we have if we can help avoid it. That's the only comment that I have, is it would not look very good if we had the funds sitting here and we didn't provide the resources that we were made aware of that are failing, and we're set up for a potential fish kill again.
Okay, Kirsty had a comment. There will be the Supervisor Shinsky.
I was just nodding my head in agreement, but I do have to say I wholeheartedly agree with what Chair Gibbs said. And I would just urge you to please consider the authority that you are given in your positions. I know that there are options for perhaps opening the floor up for, the next several months to make decisions in a competitive process, but I would challenge you to think of projects that could equal as great of an environmental impact than the Big Old Plain Reservoir and the groundwater status of Marathon County. I think that they are the mission that is fulfilling the intent of the Environmental Impact Fund with greater quality than any other potential project that this committee could consider. And so if there is something in you that would consider making a time-sensitive decision today, knowing that you have people in the room and a department that does oversee the environmental health of our county behind these, I would just urge you to consider those.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things that relative to the aerator project or proposed aerator project, and I understand the urgency and the fact that this is only one piece of the puzzle, and it's a small part of the puzzle that we can affect, but we obviously cannot affect the overall flow of the river and all the other environmental factors that are going on. We could just kind of play around the edges. What I don't know, and maybe I should because I've lived here that long, but when we had the fish kill back in 2009, how bad was it? How long did it, what was the broader impact, and how long did it take to recover from that impact? I think those are all variables that we need to know so that we can factor that into the decision-making process. And I think the other thing that we've touched on a little bit, if we do have a resolution that would come to the board, I think it would behoove you to have the information from the Old Plain Park, what that economic impact is. That helps to build the case on both sides of what would we be avoiding, and then what would we also be supporting.
Supervisor Vinsky?
Just going back to your question over there. Back in 2009, I did walk those banks, and let's just put it this way. You don't want to see it happen again. It stunk so bad. Let's just put it this way. There was probably several million fish that died. You walk the banks, it's nothing but fish, just scattered for miles, okay? Impact, no fishing. Fishing was low for a lot of years for anybody to do ice fishing and summer boating. Even for me, ice fishing that. I couldn't fish out there for about, half a dozen years because it was that bad. For all the animals out there, blue herrings, anything else that eats the fish, like you said, the economic impact, it was something that you don't want to happen again.
Right, but we're only one factor in that process. But you're providing some nice context. So, did we recover in 5 years, 10 years? Are we still recovering? I guess I'm just trying to understand, how much we can affect and what we are hoping to avoid and what the impacts would be.
Like Chair Gibbs said, this was just a Band-Aid.
Try to maintain decorum.
No, that's fine. No, I'll be done here. But like Chair said, Gibbs said, this is just a Band-Aid. But you don't want this to happen again. This is something, if we can fix, let's do it.
Chair Gibbs.
Sure. To answer some of the questions that Supervisor Sierpinski has posed, and they're not bad questions. They're good questions. I think there's reports out there, and we could go back and look, but there's estimates that 90% of the game fish were killed. And so that really created what a lot of people call the Dead Sea. In the sport fishing arena, it was literally called that for some time. And so there was some significant economic impacts. I don't know that you can quantify all of those. I mean, sometimes it's a challenge to try to quantify what you didn't get in comparison to what you could have gotten. And so I caution people on having something definitive in that nature. But I do think that, if there's a opportunity to try to at least put the Band-Aid back on and put the aerators back in function, that may save a portion of the fish stock in that water body, it would behoove us to absolutely do that because, like I said, I know the black eye that the county got and the county department received because of they were blaming in effect a lot of the runoff the manure runoff and the nitrogen and the oxygen depletion because of the nitrogen in the water. So, like I said, I would fully support trying to utilize anything that we can to make those aerators work.
And that was before my time on the board, but to Chair Gibbs' point, that shook loose a cobweb in my head, and yes, the county's reputation, and I feel like there was a lot of finger pointing. Yeah, so I guess a couple more comments then is that the staff feels that based on the parameters of what these funds are intended to be spent on, that these would be too highly high return areas, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that they're appropriate for the money to be spent on and that we would get a lot of benefit from them. The other question I was going to ask, and maybe Kirsty would know, some of the information that Supervisor Stravinsky is asking for, do the nonprofit groups have any data or have any information on that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, WVIC even offered to come to this meeting to answer questions and do a presentation. We didn't feel like it was appropriate to set that up. It was a little bit preemptive, but they give beautiful presentations and they are like data hounds, they are nonstop testing water and they have years and years of information. So I know for a fact WVIC and BEPCO each have very digestible data and pictures and all that history that they could easily give even a 20-minute presentation on, should that be your desire.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Drabek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering on the, let's say we voted to do the 150,000 or whatever, and it all went through. What needs to be done? Would that get there on time to fix things, or was it going to be a fish kill anyway?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would probably be a more appropriate question for WVIC because they are the ones that are working directly with, potential people to help with the aerators.
Sure. Just to answer a part of that question, I know that historically they are monitoring the oxygen level of the water, and if they find what they determine to be a oxygen depleted zone, they will effectuate and start operating the aerators to help try to mitigate that dead zone when that gets to the oxygen or it gets to the aerators themselves. Historically, they were starting to operate them in February and in March. So that's when they started to see the oxygen depleted area because that's when they're also doing the drawdown. Understand that they're doing drawdown in the wintertime of the Eau Plaine Reservoir to set up reserves for the melt-off in the spring. So that's what they're doing, is they're drawing down the reserve off of the Eau Plaine, and as that happens, they accelerate the oxygen-depleted area on the Eau Plaine, and it brings it further and further downstream, which then depletes the oxygen and kills off the fish. So, but historically, they haven't started operating them until February. So this will prevent some. Will it prevent all? Probably not. Probably not.
But we don't know whether or not there would be a kill. It's just that there's a number of indicators that will lead us to believe that there will be a kill again.
Correct.
Okay.
All the factors that lead up to it is.
Yep. Supervisor Shafinsky?
Are the aerators actually operated every year, or is it sort of on an on-needed basis? They are. Okay, I'm seeing you
Be a good
nodding.
question for WVIC, right? Yeah.
So, okay, and these are all questions, don't misconstrue my questions. I'm just trying to understand the issue and all sides of it. I actually am very positive on the idea that we need to do something. So just trying to understand all of it and how we can best present it to the board as a whole.
I feel like I also feel positive with these, and I feel like highlighting our partnership with WVIC with a project like this, and also having them here with us to talk about the project would be a good idea. I myself would feel comfortable supporting with staff to at least be directed to start formulating the actions needed in order to get this stuff put together. I don't think we would be in a place to do budget transfers this month, but I think definitely next month.
We can do them in Lance is giving me a nod for January, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kirsty.
Just one thing to add too, since we are in the process of working within the partnership to update our current MOU or MOA that we have on file, it really would be a prime opportunity to kind of get that to a point where we'd feel comfortable presenting it to you all, at the next meeting when this would be fully discussed. Because it needs to be tweaked a little bit considering donations from the EIF fund. That's a perfect opportunity to have the verbiage really crisp and clean to what the committee feels comfortable with, given the large contribution. So, we don't have that existing one that we're tied to at this point. We can edit it to a point where everyone feels comfortable.
Okay. All right. So, given the information that's in front of the committee, it sounds like we are directing staff to retain the $650,000 for the POUTS loan and begin exploring using the remaining $550,000 up to that amount for the groundwater plan and the aerator replacement at the Big O Plain.
Okay. And so we can bring it to the January for budget transfer. Is that what you're saying, Lance, too? Just so I.
Yeah, I think that's sufficient. Let me repeat back what I think you're asking staff to do, and that's finalizing plans for exactly what you just indicated, Chair Langenhan. That is, flesh out the plan relative to aerator replacement, which is what Kirsty's talking about, which would encompass the cleaning up those previous MOAs and MOUs with those partners, and also that groundwater plan really coming back with, this is the proposal, and we can have a resolution for each of those that would provide for the budget transfers that would really make those happen. Okay. We can do that and have that ready for your next meeting next month.
Third. Yeah.
And then have it in front of the county board in January.
Okay. Is there any objection from the committee for directing staff to do that work? All right. Staff, you have your, I was going to say orders. Staff, you have,
Thank you.
have direction. What's that? Suggestions. Ugh. Okay, I believe that finishes 7B 1 through 3. Is that correct? Okay. This might be me being a little. I've got one more thing I'd like to do before we get down to 8. For 7A, I'd like to go back there, and I guess it might be a question for Lance. Lance, does there need to be a motion to approve that strat plan information again? We're not changing anything. It was already forwarded to exec.
Yeah, my understanding is you already did provide all that information.
And we're not changing anything, so.
I don't have any issue with it, and if.
Okay.
But I defer certainly to Chair Gibbs.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Just be prepared to present it, because it will be for the December 14th meeting. Yeah. There's 3 committees that will be, it's going to be discussed by exec for 3 meetings. Or 3 committees are going to be taken up on the 14th, and then 3 in January, and then we'll present to the full board the combined 6 committees.
Sure.
recommendations,
Yeah.
or what the exec committee's recommendation is.
Yeah, I'll be ready. I hope everybody else is, so, all right. Item number 8, next meeting, January 3rd, 2022, 3 PM, Assembly Room and future agenda items. A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. 8B, announcements, requests, correspondence. B1, reminder of 2023 ERC meeting dates.
So I'm not sure if we distributed them before hard copy. We may have. There was a couple errors in that. This is the correct set of dates in front of you right now on the screen. It's the last page in your packet, and Nicole will be sending out the appointments, just so that you are aware of the correct ERC meeting dates for 2023. And probably the one that is a little out of order is the 6/27, because if we followed the rules in Chapter 2, you'd be me on the 4th of July. So, so we moved it to 6/27.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't have anything, and it doesn't look like anybody else has got anything, so we'll move on to item number 9. Motion by Supervisor Drabek, second by Supervisor Seefeld. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, committee members. Thank you, staff.
Before everybody heads out,